All right, folks, big speech tonight. The first time since President Joe Biden is going to address a joint session of Congress. Now, first of all, y'all, it's not called a State of the Union. That does not happen until the first year of the president. This is simply called a joint session of Congress, a presidential address. A number of issues are going to be addressed tonight. Y'all can go ahead and show the graphic. He's going to be speaking about, of course, COVID-19. He'll be talking about all kind of different stuff, including police accountability, racial justice, and we talked about some of this stuff a little bit earlier. Robert, I want to go to you, and first of all, here's what often happens on nights like this. First of all, I really hate when the White House releases excerpts of the president's speech. And here's why. When I was at CNN, I used to hate that because they would send us the copy of the speech, and people would be sitting on set, not actually listening to the speech. They'd be reading through the whole speech, and then all of a sudden people talking about he's going to say this and say that. Then you got members of Congress. They've already prepared their statement. Republicans already prepared their statements. His speech sucked. And then Democrats have already prepared their statements. It was the most wonderful thing since sliced bread. And so I never liked that. I wish one time the president, I wish they wouldn't release it and force everybody to actually listen to it when it actually has been stated. But I do appreciate, and I do think it's going to be important for President Biden to lean in on this issue of racial justice.
Well, you're very correct. And I think that's what many in the African-American community are going to be listening for, because they told us, come out in record numbers in November and we will work on racial justice issues. Turn out in record numbers in January for the Senate runoff and we will work on racial issues. And then when they got into office in the first 100 days, of course, we had to deal with the COVID vaccine. Of course, we had to deal with the economic stimulus. Of course, we had to deal with the American Relief Bill. Now we're moving on to infrastructure. Now we're moving on to the Iranian nuclear deal. We're talking about the Paris Climate Accords, re-entering the Green New Deal. Now, a lot of black folks are sitting at home like, hey, now, don't forget about us again. So I think it's going to be very important for him to lay out exactly what the agenda is going to be for the community. It's one thing to tell us during the campaign season we're the most important thing to the Democratic Party. It's another thing to show us through executive action and through a legislative agenda exactly what you're going to do. The second thing I'm going to be looking out for is the Tim Scott rebuttal, because what we've seen in recent years from Republicans is that the rebuttal is what kills political careers. The rebuttal is what they do to you when they want to make sure you never have a chance in national office going forward. We saw Bobby Jindal coming out of that weird stairwell. That ended his political career. We saw Marco Rubio with the bottle of water where Trump derided him for that. So the fact that they're sending Tim Scott out there is showing that they see him as a threat in 2024, and depending on how he does tonight will determine whether or not he's a viable candidate going forward, or if he joins that long line of people who gave the rebuttal to the presidential address that you never heard from again.
You know, pump your brakes. First of all, you're right. When Bob McDonnell gave the response, of course, he later got indicted, was chased out of office. But remember, Stacey Abrams also gave a rebuttal.
Well, particularly on the Republican side of the aisle, the Republicans send you out there to die, just like they did with Bobby Jindal and also Marco Rubio. They don't expect you to do well. They expect you to fall on your face, and it's really their way to clear minorities out of the field going forward. We even saw Nikki Haley when she had a chance to do so, that you don't hear from them much thereafter. I'm hoping Tim Scott knocks it out of the park, because I would like to see a competitive primary on the Republican side going into 2024 and him being a major player on that side of the aisle.
President Biden right now, folks, is making his way to the U.S. Capitol from the White House grounds. Monique, I'm quite sure when Biden gets to the part about race, I hope they do a cutaway to Lindsey Graham's face. Did you hear what this idiot had to say on Fox News? Guys, anyway, well, listen.
Don't play it. It's so ignorant. Don't play.
Stop talking. Stop talking.
In policing. Senator, is there systemic racism in this country in policing and in other institutions?
No, not in my opinion. We just elected a two-term African-American president. The vice president is of African-American Indian descent. So our systems are not racist. America is not a racist country. Within every society, you have bad actors. The Chauvin trial was a just result.
Senator, is there.
Oh, I guess, Monique, when Thurgood Marshall was named to the Supreme Court, all issues with race just left the criminal justice system. I guess when Senator Edward Brooke became the first African American United States senator since Reconstruction for Massachusetts in the '60s, that all things were gone in politics, the Republican Party. I guess when Doug Wilder, as well as Deval Patrick, became governors of Virginia and Massachusetts, everything was well.
What he said is fundamentally important and revelatory, because the things that he pointed to, and obviously he's correct, two-term black president, current vice president who is black and Indian. So every time Americans get the opportunity to vote, the country moves forward. And especially when the efforts to oppress the vote are unsuccessful. That's why they fight like they do. And then when Americans get the opportunity to put a man of conscience in office, like a Joe Biden, who does what is right and names as his running mate someone who takes the country forward, you get those results. And that's always on the Democratic side of the aisle. But he answered about voting when the question was about systems. Maybe he doesn't understand what systems are. Maybe he was just deflecting to the closest, most prominent black people who have ever held an office. But it's very clear that voting can go one direction, and that the systems that are in place that we deal with as black people day in, day out are still rigged against us and cause the type of harm that it's going to take centuries to repair, even if we started fixing it now.
Well, Scott, I love when the same question was posed to HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge, former congressman from Ohio. This was her response.
Well, the first steps is we've already taken the position that we needed to move quickly to submit to OMB the changes that we want to make in the fair housing rules as well as in the disparate impact rules. We've already reversed the equal access rule. One thing that you and I have in common is that we are both trained lawyers. Fair housing is the law. And I would say that Lindsey Graham is certainly entitled to his opinion. But let me tell you the fact. If we didn't have systemic racism, we would not need a Fair Housing Act. We would not need a Civil Rights Act. We would not need a Voting Rights Act. We would not live in a country where today black women are 3 times as likely to die in childbirth as white women. We would not live in a country today where, as you suggested just a minute ago, that the gap in home ownership between black and white people is the same or bigger than it was in 1968. We would not be living in a country where we're concerned about our children having the same access to the same equipment so that they can get ahead and have a fair chance. I don't know what Lindsey is judging, but I would say to you that in a country where white people have a net worth 10 times that of black people, there is racism. There is, in fact, systemic racism in this country.
Scott?
Well, she's absolutely right. And those socioeconomic and health numbers bear that out. You wouldn't need a Civil Rights Act. You wouldn't need a Human Rights Act if you didn't have systemic racism. But Lindsey Graham represents the fundamental problem with the GOP. They see the Chauvin trial as Chauvin being a bad actor, but that doesn't make the police department bad. They see Barack Obama and Kamala Harris as exceptions to the rule, so therefore racism doesn't exist, but they ought to be the rule. And the problem is they're not the rule because of what Marcia Fudge just explained in her interview. And so until the Lindsey Grahams of the world concede that systemic racism is hurting and killing America, that she could be her best in this American experiment if you were to eradicate it, as opposed to thinking that teaching about slavery or talking about systemic racism is somehow some attack on American exceptionalism or the greatness of America or the American experiment, then he's going to continue to deny slavery. He's going to continue to deny that there's systemic racism simply because you have exceptions to the rule. It's complete BS, and I think deep down he knows it, but that's why the GOP and many people who look like Lindsey Graham will never get it because they live in denial and they ignore the numbers that show those wealth gaps, socioeconomic gaps, the health gaps in this country. And you wouldn't have them if it was a country of freedom, justice, and equality and equal opportunity. These are facts. This isn't an argument I'm making.
Well, but
I'm reporting.
Well, I can guarantee you, you're going to see or going to hear a whole lot of whining and complaining. Why he keep talking about race? What you're seeing right now, folks, is a live feed of the U.S. Capitol. If you got the audio, turn it up, please. And we're also seeing something historic for the first time. You are seeing two women who will be seated behind right there is Congressman Jim Clyburn talking, it looks like, with Steny Hoyer, Majority Leader, and I believe that is Senator Rob Portman of Ohio. As I said, history is being made. History is being made today, folks, where you have two women who will be sitting behind the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, and his female Speaker of the House. Monique, barriers still broken in 2021.
Yes, and for however long it took, we're here now, and I am very much looking forward to seeing that for myself, but even more so, I'm just thankful for my daughter and for all of our daughters that who really won't know that it took so long and will have seen this in the years where what they think they can be and all of their dreams are being formulated. It is, the optics of it do matter, and the substance of it is even better.
Robert, it's going to be certainly a big night.
Absolutely, and I think just to circle back between the two women sitting behind or seated behind the president, and also to Lindsey Graham's point about there not being any systemic racism because of Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. We have to understand how Barack Obama and Kamala Harris got there. It was because Republicans rammed the country and indeed the world into the ground twice in a decade. When you look at the financial collapse under George W. Bush in the mid-2000s, the two wars he got us into, the housing collapse, the world markets that he put into a recession, that's what it took to get Barack Obama elected. If you look at Donald Trump in 4 years of racism, xenophobia, sexism, and allowing a virus to kill 500,000 people, that's what got Kamala Harris elected. It's almost like David Culley, the coach for the Houston Texans. He didn't get that. He got that job after they traded away the best wide receiver, after they release the best lineman, after your quarterback says he wants to go. Then you give a black person the job after you destroy the entire institution. So when Lindsey Graham says there's no systemic racism because of that, he has to look at his own party and paving the way for these advances in black America by being so incompetent that America was willing to risk it on somebody named Barack Hussein Obama, who was able to drag us out of that very recession that him and his acolytes caused.
The issues that will be talked about, the issues that will be covered are obviously pertinent and important to where we are as a nation. Scott, there are so many major things that we are facing, and bottom line is this here. What we're dealing with is a president who comes in with a high approval rating. Republicans are not happy about that, but what it also shows is that he has had his head down and focused on doing the job and not getting caught up in food fights.
And he's been a transformative leader already with big plans on infrastructure, big plans on closing the wealth gap, big plans on bringing us out of COVID-19 and creating an economy that we can all be participants in. He is potentially the FDR early on of the 21st century, and the Republicans have got to find a way to label him a radical. But if he's radical, he's been radical in saving America and saving their constituents as well as Democratic constituents. And so it's going to be hard to to label him on one hand, but how do you turn that into votes? 2022 is right around the corner. This speech is as much about 2022 as well as getting bipartisan support for infrastructure, for example, and healthcare. And so it's going to be an interesting speech, and he's going to lean in on the racial equity, of course. But what's going to be more interesting is what Tim Scott's response is to what promises to be a powerful speech, a necessary speech, and big plans to change America after all it's been through with Donald Trump and prior GOP leadership. Now is the time, and if he's radical, it's radical because America needs these big plans, and rich people, in part, are going to pay for it. The question is, will America accept that formula despite the GOP's opposition? It'll be reflected in 2022. So we ought to stay tuned because this is the beginning of the midterms with this speech right here.
Well, the thing here, Monique, that I think is really, really, really important when we talk about this particular speech, and is Biden has been focusing on the bread and butter issues and has been deft at ignoring, again, the sort of BS stuff that typically gets tossed out that folks sort of fall for, and I think that to me is what's important.
Yes, and it's the exact opposite, right, of what we've been dealing with for the past 4 years. I mean, he is a polar opposite, and it sort of defies what people say about these inside the
1 second right now. I got to stop it right now. Let's go to Capitol Hill.
The chair appoints as members of the committee on the part of the House to escort the President of the United States into the chamber: the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer; the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Clyburn; the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark; the gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries; the gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar; the gentlewoman from Delaware, Ms. Blunt Rochester; the gentleman from California, Mr. McCarthy; the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney; the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole; the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Brady; the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Owens; and the gentlewoman from Iowa, Mrs. Miller Meeks.
The President of the Senate, at the direction of that body, appoints the following senators as members of the Committee on the part of the Senate to escort the President of the United States into the House chamber: the Senator from New York, Mr. Schumer; the Senator from Vermont, Mr. Leahy; the Senator from Illinois, Mr. Durbin; the Senator from Michigan, Ms. Stabenow; the Senator from Vermont, Mr. Sanders; the Senator from Minnesota, Ms. Klobuchar; the Senator from Kentucky, Mr. McConnell; the Senator from South Dakota, Mr. Thune; the Senator from Wyoming, Mr. Barrasso; the Senator from Iowa, Ms. Ernst; the Senator from Missouri, Mr. Blunt; the Senator from Florida, Mr. Scott.
The members of the escort committee will exit the chamber through the lobby doors, the right and left of the Speaker's podium.
Monique, what many people don't realize is, I mean, obviously there's a lot of pomp and circumstance that surrounds a presidential speech to Congress. He just can't decide on his own. He has to actually be invited by the Speaker of the House to speak to Congress. And so there's this process of House and Senate members from both parties escorting the President of the United States into the chamber. That all reflects the three distinct branches of government: executive, congressional, as well as judicial.
Yes, and we found out last year, didn't we, that the whole invitation part is not perfunctory, at least not with this speaker, because she decided against it when we were in the throes of some issues with the prior president. And I love to see it. So yes, there's a lot that goes into these things happening, and I think it's necessary. It shows that at least now we're returning to some semblance of having a functioning government with people who are serious-minded about doing the work, and that our systems were tried and tested but held under severe test.
The thing that is also interesting, we talked about policy, Robert, and the things that are important. Look, Biden, his top three issues, all those poll extremely well with all Americans: COVID-19 stimulus, infrastructure, free college tuition. And so he's going up against a party that is obstinate in so many ways, but he has the advantage of standing with the issues. There's one of the newest United States senators right there, Raphael Warnock, out of Georgia. And so, again, the Republicans can argue, yell, kick, and scream. It's a little hard when the public likes those proposals.
Well, you can see the contrast in leadership just based on these statements coming out of the office of the 45th president this week. While Joe Biden's been working on a $2 trillion infrastructure plan, working on racial justice and equality, investigating hate crimes against African Americans nationwide, bringing DOJ charges against individuals who have killed black people, President Trump is sending out statements about the Oscars having low ratings. Today, he sent out a statement saying that we have to concentrate on the recount taking place in Arizona because of the fraudulent, stolen 2020 election. When you have a backward-facing party whose leadership is backward-facing, then that's when you start seeing all these canards that they try to distract us with. Instead of talking about infrastructure, they want to talk about cancel culture. Instead of talking about rebuilding our judicial system and our federal judiciary, they want to talk about Mr. Potato Head or something along those lines. And that sounds so stupid. It sounds like I'm making it up, but I'm not. So what Joe Biden has to do today is reinvigorate the American people and let them know that the American government is working on their side. We have adults in power now, and we'll be fighting for
that. When I talked about the pomp and circumstance that takes place, you have these various introductions that take place. You just heard the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. You're going to see them introduce the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Supreme Court justices. Those things will be happening, but in the next 7 to 10 minutes. This speech should be beginning shortly after 9 p.m. Scott, I go back to those issues. The smartest place, the smartest thing, and y'all can go ahead and leave the audio up, that's fine. The smartest place, frankly, for President Biden to be is to focus on those issues in this first year with overwhelming support, because what it also does is it boxes in the Republicans.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And he's got to reverse that trend of losing seats in the House and Senate in 2022. That's difficult, for example, to talk about bipartisanship when you don't have another political party, at least not one that functions with any reasonableness. You think about the Republican Party, they're a party of no. They don't have a platform. They don't have a plank. Sure, they have sayings, if you will, They, like guns. They hate abortions. They hate them, but they don't really stand and operate as a party. So it's hard to get bipartisanship. Even on infrastructure, it's been difficult because they got to win by suppressing the vote and feeding into the lies that the Trump has fed his constituent and their constituents in their various states and jurisdictions. And so it's going to be complicated to do this with bipartisanship.
Right.
That's why the filibuster becomes so important.
Obviously, we're
getting rid of it.
Obviously, we're in a COVID era. Normally, you have most, if not all, of Supreme Court justices who attend a presidential address. They just introduced Chief Justice John Roberts. He's the only one there. And so not all folks are there. You also see the COVID protocols taking place. Everyone on the floor has to wear a mask. I'm quite sure, Monique, that's pissed off Republicans. They would love not to have to wear their masks. Here's another introduction right now. So more introductions taking place. Different folks who are being walked into the chamber. And again, I really do get a kick out of. I know. I'm telling you, Monique, Republicans are driving themselves crazy because they got to wear masks, and I'm sure they're like, damn it, I want to sling it like Kim Mulkey did the other day when she got introduced as a Louisiana State head coach.
Right, but it's they're relearning the game of follow the leader, and it's hard lessons. They're getting the lessons of a 4-year-old right now.
And well, of course they are. And so, but I just bottom line is, and here's the deal: they can't ignore Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, Robert, because she will gut check them.
Well, that's exactly what I was talking about. The fact that Republicans have decided to make the vaccine that Donald Trump takes credit for developing, they've now made that a political issue instead of just getting behind it and saying we reopened by everybody getting vaccinated. They've turned masks into a political issue that they want to fight about. Tucker Carlson saying they used to call child services if you see somebody making their child wear a mask the other day on his show. The reason they are taking these little small...
First Lady Jill Biden coming into the chamber. Go ahead, Robert.
Absolutely. The reason they are taking the small and petty fight and trying to turn them into football issues is the American people are behind the Biden agenda. They're behind the check. They're behind infrastructure. They're behind the creation of jobs. They're behind modernizing the nation. They're behind a president who's not tweeting about the Oscars and seems to have their nose to the grindstone for the American people. The Republicans have not found a way to attack that, so they attack these culture war issues instead of attacking it for policy.
And that is the thing that we always have got to be mindful of. Again, how Republicans, they're always focusing on their evangelical supporters. It's always about the culture issues, how they get them all caught up and riled up. And I'm telling Monique, it's just. Look, stay the course. If you focus on the issues, again, that's one of the things that will just drive them crazy all the time. And again, people want to see stuff gets done. You see right there, members of the president's cabinet just introduced. You see there Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense. Not all cabinet members are there. Normally, there is one cabinet member who is the designated survivor, if you will. Remember the television show? Well, because not all cabinet members are there, no need for a designated person because a bunch of them are at home. So that's not required. It's not required. But again, Monique, as I was saying, it's the policy. And what this speech does tonight, it sets the stage for really the next year of the administration.
Yes, and nobody can deny that considering everything that President Biden faced coming into office, he has had a remarkably effective first 100 days, but he didn't just leave it at effectiveness. He has been proposing things that even the progressives, the way progressives of his own party can applaud and get behind. Now, whether the legislators act on it or not, that's another thing. The president is doing everything that he can with his powers, and we will see more of that happen tonight. And it's just leaving the GOP rudderless. It's leaving them, identityless, and they are still victims themselves of their Trumpian years, and they have to figure out, as Robert and Scott were saying, what they stand for. Do they even have real principled political positions anymore, or are they just the opposing party?
Oh, yeah.
Scott, go ahead.
Roland, if I may, that's a really important point. Early on, the GOP has decided to continue to embrace Trump because their polling tells us that he's still the titular head of the party, and the voters still believe in him. And so they've continued. They haven't unhooked their wagon to his political train yet. I think we're going to see in the next several months whether that holds or not, given Biden's policies and how he's turned America around, even for those who didn't vote for him, and whether that leadership model of his really works. Because if you start to see the polling trend away from Trump, you'll start to see McCarthy as well as Mitch McConnell trend away as well, because they look at the political winds. But it's going to be striking in this regard, because early on they decided he's still the most popular, but that's not surprising. The reality is he's going to still be there leading with the GOP constituent in December of this year, or January of next year, January 2022. We're a long way off in politics, and so it's going to be a gamble or a gambit that they are trying, that if they lose that gambit, the Dems have a real opportunity with money and the right candidates to gain seats in both houses. That's a longer discussion, but that's the GOP gamble, is really a winner-take-all approach, relying on Trump.
And look, you already see the battles in the House Republican Conference. That's who actually, this is the Senate Democrat leadership. Then the moment you'll see the House leaders, House Republican leaders come in. And they're already fighting, Monique, because you have Kevin McCarthy, who has been saying, damn, if Liz Cheney, can you stop dissing Trump? And her whole deal is the man has no place in the party. I love how they're all at each other's throats.
Right, and she's just not the one to mess with. It's standing up for whatever it is that she believes in and saying what she's going to say. That's running through her veins. That's genetic predisposition. So she's going to say it until they quiet her, until somebody starts listening.
That to me, I think, again, I am absolutely loving and enjoying the battles that are going on. Look, we have to be focused on what's happening in the states, though. Robert, I get everybody's focus on what's happening in D.C., but the voter suppression bills that are being passed, Florida is close to passing their own. This follows Georgia. We see what's happening in Texas. With redistricting, Democrats could also be losing seats, depending upon how bad seats are being gerrymandered. And so they only have a 3-vote majority. Republicans could very well gerrymander themselves into controlling the House next year.
And that's exactly what the plan is. We saw this in apartheid South Africa. We saw this in Kosovo. We saw this in many war-torn nations, where when you have a previous governing majority who is beginning to lose power, what they figure out how to do is to rig the rules to maintain political power through the minority. They see the singularity coming in the next 15 to 20 years, when we'll be a majority-minority nation. They understand the Republicans have not won the popular vote in a presidential election in the last 17 years, since 2004, and indeed only one time in the last 32 years since 1988. They understand that their political policies are not the policies that the majority of Americans support. They do not even attempt to win the majority of votes anymore. Rather, they have a strategy where they can simply gerrymander, redistrict, and shave their way to victory, and that's the plan going forward. And right now, Republicans have a battle for the soul of the party because that is not a sustainable model. Eventually, you have to figure out how to get the majority of people on your side. And right now, Joe Biden is pushing forward agenda items which the majority of American people support, and it's difficult to see exactly what the Republican policy proposals will be and what Tim Scott's response will be tonight.
But there, Scott, speak of that particular point.
Of the United States.
I can't hear you. Say that again.
Actually, here is President Joe Biden entering the chamber.
Of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor to present to you the President of the United States.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good to be back. As Mitch and Chuck will understand, it's good to be almost home. Down the hall. Anyway, thank you all. Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President. No president has ever said those words from this podium. No president has ever said those words, and it's about time. First Lady, I'm her husband. Second Gentleman, Chief Justice, members of the United States Congress and the Cabinet, distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. While the setting tonight is familiar, this gathering is just a little bit different. A reminder of the extraordinary times we're in. Throughout our history, presidents have come to this chamber to speak to Congress, to the nation, and to the world, to declare war, to celebrate peace, to announce new plans and possibilities. Tonight, I come to talk about crisis and opportunity, about rebuilding the nation, revitalizing our democracy, and winning the future for America. I stand here tonight, one day shy of the 100th day of my administration. 100 days since I took the oath of office and lifted my hand off our family Bible and inherited a nation, we all did, that was in crisis. The worst pandemic in a century. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Now, After just 100 days, I can report to the nation, America is on the move again. Turning peril into possibility, crisis to opportunity, setbacks into strength. We all know life can knock us down, but in America, we never, ever, ever stay down. Americans always get up. Today, that's what we're doing. America's rising anew, choosing hope over fear, truth over lies, and light over darkness. After 100 days of rescue and renewal, America is ready for a takeoff, in my view. We're working again, dreaming again, discovering again, and leading the world again. We have shown each other and the world that there's no quit in America, none. 100 days ago, America's house was on fire. We had to act. And thanks to the extraordinary leadership of Speaker Pelosi, Majority Leader Schumer, and the overwhelming support of the American people, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, we did act. Together we passed the American Rescue Plan, one of the most consequential rescue packages in American history. We're already seeing the results. We're already seeing the results. After I promised we'd get 100 million COVID-19 vaccine shots into people's arms in 100 days, we will have provided over 220 million COVID shots in those 100 days. Thanks to all the help of all of you. We're marshaling, with your help, everyone's help, we're marshaling every federal resource. We've gotten vaccines to nearly 40,000 pharmacies and over 700 community health centers where the poorest of the poor can be reached. We're setting up community vaccination sites, developing mobile units to get to hard-to-reach communities. Today, 90% of Americans now live within 5 miles of a vaccination site. Everyone over the age of 16, everyone is now eligible to get vaccinated right now, right away. Go get vaccinated, America. Go and get the vaccination. They're available. You're eligible now. When I was sworn in on January 20th, less than 1% of the seniors in America were fully vaccinated against COVID-19. 100 days later, 70% of seniors in America over 65 are protected, fully protected. Senior deaths from COVID-19 are down 80% since January. Down 80% because of all of you. And more than half of all the adults in America have gotten at least one shot. A mass vaccination center in Glendale, Arizona, I asked the nurse, I said, "What's it like?" She looked at me and she said, "It's like every shot is giving a dose of hope," was her phrase, a dose of hope. A dose of hope for an educator in Florida who has a child suffering from an autoimmune disease. Wrote to me, said she's worried, and she was worried about bringing the virus home. She said she then got vaccinated at a large site in her car. She said she sat in her car when she got vaccinated and just cried. Cried out of joy and cried out of relief. Parents, seeing the smiles on their kids' faces for those who are able to go back to school because the teachers and school bus drivers and cafeteria workers have been vaccinated. Grandparents, hugging their children and grandchildren instead of pressing hands against a window to say goodbye. It means everything. Those things mean everything. You know, there's still, you all know it. You know it better than any group of Americans. There's still more work to do to beat this virus. We can't let our guard down. But tonight, I can say, because of you, the American people, our progress these past 100 days against one of the worst pandemics in history has been one of the greatest logistical achievements this country's ever seen. What else have we done in those first 100 days? We kept our commitment, Democrats and Republicans, of sending $1,400 rescue checks to 85% of American households. We've already sent more than 160 million checks out the door. It's making a difference. You all know it when you go home. For many people, it's making all the difference in the world. A single mom in Texas who wrote me, she said she couldn't work, but she said the relief check put food on the table and saved her and her son from eviction from their apartment. A grandmother in Virginia who told me she immediately took her granddaughter to the eye doctor, something she said she put off for months because she didn't have the money. One of the defining images, at least from my perspective in this crisis, has been cars lined up for miles. And not people just barely able to start those cars, nice cars, lined up for miles, waiting for a box of food to be put in their trunk. I don't know about you, but I didn't ever think I'd see that in America. And all of this is through no fault of their own. No fault of their own, these people are in this position. That's why the rescue plan is delivering food and nutrition assistance to millions of Americans facing hunger. And hunger is down sharply already. We're also providing rental assistance. You all know this, but the American people, I want to make sure they understand. Keeping people from being evicted from their homes. Providing loans to small businesses that reopen and keep their employees on the job. During these 100 days, an additional 800,000 Americans enrolled in the Affordable Care Act when I established a special sign-up period to do that. 800,000 in that period. We're making one of the largest one-time ever investments, ever, in improving health care for veterans. Critical investments to address the opioid crisis. And maybe most importantly, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, we're on track to cut child poverty in America in half this year. And in the process, while this was all going on, the economy created more than 1,300,000 new jobs in 100 days. More jobs in the first 100 days than any president on record. The International Monetary Fund is now estimating our economy will grow at a rate of more than 6% this year. That will be the fastest pace of economic growth in this country in nearly 4 decades. America's moving forward, but we can't stop now. We're in competition with China and other countries to win the 21st century. We're at a great inflection point in history. We have to do more than just build back better. We have to build back better. We have to compete more strenuously than we have. Throughout our history, if you think about it, public investment in infrastructure has literally transformed America. Our attitudes as well as our opportunities. The Transcontinental Railroad, the interstate highways, united 2 oceans and brought a totally new age of progress to the United States of America. Universal public schools and college aid opened wide the doors of opportunity. Scientific breakthroughs took us to the moon. Now we're on Mars. Discovering vaccines gave us the internet, and so much more. These are investments we made together as one country, and investments that only the government was in a position to make. Time and again, they propel us into the future. That's why I proposed the American Jobs Plan, a once-in-a-generation investment in America itself. This is the largest jobs plan since World War II. Creates jobs to upgrade our transportation infrastructure. Jobs modernizing our roads, bridges, highways. Jobs building ports and airports, rail corridors, transit lines. It's clean water. And today, up to 10 million homes in America and more than 400,000 schools and child care centers have pipes with lead in them, including drinking water. A clear and present danger to our children's health. American Jobs Plan creates jobs replacing 100% of the nation's lead pipes and service lines, so every American can drink clean water. And in the process, will create thousands and thousands of good-paying jobs. It creates jobs connecting every American with high-speed internet, including 35% of the rural America that still doesn't have it. This is going to help our kids and our businesses succeed in the 21st century economy. And I'm asking the Vice President to lead this effort, if she would, because I know it will get done. Creates jobs building a modern power grid. Our grids are vulnerable to storms, hacks, catastrophic failures with tragic results, as we saw in Texas and elsewhere during the winter storms. The American Jobs Plan will create jobs that lay thousands of miles of transmission lines needed to build a resilient and fully clean grid. We can do that. Look, the American Jobs Plan will help millions of people get back to their jobs and back to their careers. 2 million women have dropped out of the workforce during this pandemic. 2 million. And too often because they couldn't get the care they needed to care for their child or care for an elderly parent who needs help. 800,000 families are on the Medicare waiting list right now to get home care for their aging parent or loved one with disability. If you think it's not important, check out in your own district, Democrat or Republican. Democrat or Republican voters. Their great concern, almost as much as their children, is taking care of an elderly loved one who can't be left alone. Medicaid contemplated it, but this plan is going to help those families and create jobs for our caregivers with better wages and better benefits, continuing a cycle of growth. For too long, we've failed to use the most important word when it comes to meeting the climate crisis: jobs. 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 For me, when I think climate change, I think jobs. The American Jobs Plan will put engineers and construction workers to work building more energy-efficient buildings and homes. Electrical workers, IBEW members installing 500,000 charging stations along our highways so we can own the electric car market. Farmers planting cover crops so they can reduce the carbon dioxide in the air and get paid for doing it. Look, think about it. There is simply no reason why the blades for wind turbines can't be built in Pittsburgh instead of Beijing. No reason. None. No reason. So, folks, there's no reason why American workers can't lead the world in the production of electric vehicles and batteries. I mean, there is no reason. We have the capacity. We're the brightest, best trained people in the world. The American Jobs Plan is going to create millions of good-paying jobs, jobs Americans can raise a family on. As my dad would then say, with a little breathing room. And all the investments in the American Job Plan will be guided by one principle: buy American. Buy American. And I might note parenthetically, that does not violate any trade agreement. It's been the law since the 30s. Buy American. American tax dollars are going to be used to buy American products made in America to create American jobs. That's the way it's supposed to be, and it will be in this administration. And I made it clear to all my cabinet people, their ability to give exemptions has been strenuously limited. It will be American products. Now, I know some of you at home are wondering whether these jobs are for you. So many of you, so many of the folks I grew up with, feel left behind, forgotten, in an economy that's so rapidly changing. It's frightening. I want to speak directly to you, because you think about it. That's what people are most worried about. Can I fit in? Independent experts estimate the American Jobs Plan will add millions of jobs and trillions of dollars to economic growth in the years to come. It is an 8-year program. These are good-paying jobs that can't be outsourced. Nearly 90% of the infrastructure jobs created in the American Jobs Plan do not require a college degree. 75% don't require an associate's degree. The American Jobs Plan is a blue-collar blueprint to build America. That's what it is. And it recognizes something I've always said. Good guys and women on Wall Street, but Wall Street didn't build this country. The middle class built the country, and unions built the middle class. So that's why I'm calling on Congress to pass Protect the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, and send it to my desk so we can support the right to unionize. And by the way, while you're thinking about sending things to my desk, let's raise the minimum wage to $15. No one working 40 hours a week, should live below the poverty line. We need to ensure greater equity and opportunity for women. And while we're doing this, let's get the Paycheck Fairness Act to my desk as well. Equal pay. It's been much too long. And if you wonder whether it's too long, look behind me. And finally, the American Jobs Plan will be the biggest increase in non-defense research and development on record. We'll see more technological change. And some of you know more about this than I do. We'll see more technological change in the next 10 years than we saw in the last 50. That's how rapidly artificial intelligence and so much more is changing. And we're falling behind the competition with the rest of the world. Decades ago, we used to invest 2% of our gross domestic product in America, 2% of our gross domestic product in research and development. Today, Mr. Secretary, that's less than 1%. China and other countries are closing in fast. We have to develop and dominate the products and technologies of the future. Advanced batteries, biotechnology, computer chips, clean energy. The Secretary of Defense can tell you, and those of you who work on national security issues know, the Defense Department has an agency called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. The people who set up before I came here, and that's been a long time ago, to develop breakthroughs that enhance our national security. That's their only job. And it's a semi-separate agency. It's under the Defense Department. It's led to everything from the discovery of the internet to GPS and so much more that's enhanced our security. The National Institute of Health, the NIH, I believe, should create a similar advanced research projects agency for health. And here's what it would do. It would have a singular purpose: to develop breakthroughs to prevent, detect, and treat diseases like Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer. I'll still never forget when we passed the cancer proposal in the last year as vice president. Almost $9 million going to NIH. And they've excused the point of personal privilege. I'll never forget you standing, Mitch, and saying, "Name it after my deceased son." It meant a lot. But so many of us have deceased sons, daughters, and relatives who died of cancer. I can think of no more worthy investment. I know of nothing that is more bipartisan. So let's end cancer as we know it. It's within our power. It's within our power to do it. Investments in jobs and infrastructure like the ones we're talking about have often had bipartisan support in the past. Vice President Harris and I met regularly in the Oval Office with Democrats and Republicans and discussed the jobs plan. And I applaud a group of Republican senators who just put forward their own proposal. So let's get to work. I wanted to lay out before the Congress my plan before we got into the deep discussions. I'd like to meet with those who have ideas that are different, they think are better. I welcome those ideas. But the rest of the world is not waiting for us. I just want to be clear. From my perspective, doing nothing is not an option. Look, we can't be so busy competing with one another that we forget the competition that we have with the rest of the world to win the 21st century. Secretary Blinken can tell you I spent a lot of time with President Xi. Traveled over 17,000 miles with him. Spent, they tell me, over 24 hours in private discussions with him. When he called to congratulate him, we had a 2-hour discussion. He's deadly earnest about becoming the most significant, consequential nation in the world. He and others, autocrats, think that democracy can't compete in the 21st century with autocracies because it takes too long to get consensus. To win that competition for the future, in my view, we also need to make a once-in-a-generation investment in our families and our children. That's why I've introduced the American Families Plan tonight, which addresses 4 of the biggest challenges facing American families and in turn America. First is access to good education. When this nation made 12 years of public education universal in the last century, It made us the best educated, best prepared nation in the world. It's, I believe, the overwhelming reason that propelled us to where we got in the 20th century. But the world's caught up or catching up. They're not waiting. I would say parenthetically, if we were sitting down, we set a bipartisan committee together and said, okay, we're going to decide what we do in terms of government providing for free education. I wonder whether we'd think, as we did in the 20th century, that 12 years is enough in the 21st century. I doubt it. 12 years is no longer enough today to compete with the rest of the world in the 21st century. That's why my American Families Plan guarantees 4 additional years of public education for every person in America, starting as early as we can. The great universities in this country have conducted studies of the last 10 years and shows that adding 2 years of universal high-quality preschool for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old, no matter what background they come from, puts them in the position to be able to compete all the way through 12 years and increases exponentially their prospect of graduating and going on beyond graduation. The research shows when a young child goes to school, not daycare, they're far more likely to graduate from high school and go to college or something after high school. When you add 2 years of free community college on top of that, you begin to change the dynamic. We can do that. And we'll increase Pell Grants and invest in historical black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, minority-serving institutions. The reason is they don't have the endowments. But their students are just as capable of learning about cybersecurity, just as capable of learning about metallurgy, all the things that are going on that provide those jobs of the future. Jill is a community college professor who teaches today as First Lady. She's long said, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. Joe, any country that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. She'll be deeply involved in leading this effort. Thank you, Jill. Second thing we need, American Families Plan will provide access to quality, affordable child care. We guarantee what I'm proposing in legislation, we guarantee that low and middle income families will pay no more than 7% of their income for high quality care for children up to the age of 5. The most hard-pressed working families won't have to spend a dime. Third, the American Families Plan will finally provide up to 12 weeks of paid leave and medical leave, family medical leave. We're one of the few industrial countries in the world. No one should have to choose between a job and a paycheck or taking care of themselves and their loved ones or parent or spouse or child. And fourth, the American Family Plan puts directly into the pockets of millions of Americans. In March, we expanded tax credit for every child in a family, up to $3,000 per child if they're under 6 years of age. Over 6 years of age. And $3,600 for children over 6 years of age. With 2 parents, 2 kids, that's $7,200 in the pockets that are going to help take care of your family. And that will help more than 65 million children and help cut child care poverty in half. And we can afford it. We did that in the last piece of legislation we passed. But let's extend that child care tax credit at least through the end of 2025. The American Rescue Plan lowered health care premiums for 9 million Americans who buy their coverage under the Affordable Care Act. I know that's really popular this side of the aisle. But let's make that provision permanent so their premiums don't go back up. In addition to my family's plan, I'm going to work with Congress to address this year other critical priorities for American families. The Affordable Care Act has been a lifeline for millions of Americans, protecting people with pre-existing conditions, protecting women's health, and the pandemic has demonstrated how badly it's needed. Let's lower deductibles for working families on the Affordable Care Act. And let's lower prescription drug costs. We know how to do this. The last president had that as an objective. We all know how outrageously expensive drugs are in America. In fact, we pay the highest prescription drug prices of anywhere in the world, right here in America. Nearly 3 times for the same drug, nearly 3 times what other countries pay. We have to change that, and we can. Let's do what we talked about for all the years I was down here in this body, in Congress. Let's give Medicare the power to save hundreds of billions of dollars by negotiating lower drug prescription prices. And by the way, it won't just help people on Medicare. Lower prescription drug costs for everyone. And the money we save, which is billions of dollars, can go to strengthen the Affordable Care Act and expand Medicare coverage benefits without costing taxpayers an additional penny. It's within our power to do it. Let's do it now. We've talked about it long enough, Democrats and Republicans. Let's get it done this year. This is all about a simple premise. Health care should be a right, not a privilege in America. So, how do we pay for my jobs and family plan? I made it clear we can do it without increasing the deficits. Let's start with what I will not do. I will not impose any tax increase on people making less than $400,000. But it's time for corporate America and the wealthiest 1% of Americans to just begin to pay their fair share. Just their fair share. Sometimes I have arguments with my friends in the Democratic Party. I think you should be able to become a billionaire and a millionaire, but pay your fair share. A recent study shows that 55 of the nation's biggest corporations paid 0 federal tax last year. Those 55 corporations made in excess of $40 billion in profit. A lot of companies also evade taxes through tax havens in Switzerland and Bermuda and the Cayman Islands. And they benefit from tax loopholes and deductions for offshoring jobs and shifting profits overseas. It's not right. We're going to reform corporate taxes so they pay their fair share and help pay for the public investments their businesses will benefit from as well. We're going to reward work, not just wealth. We take the top tax bracket for the wealthiest 1% of Americans, those making over $400,000 or more, back up to where it was when George W. Bush was president, when he started, 39.6%. That's where it was when George W. was president. We're going to get rid of the loopholes, allow Americans to make more than $1 million a year and pay a lower tax rate on their capital gains than Americans who receive a paycheck. We're only going to affect 0.3% of all Americans by that action, 0.3%. And the IRS is going to crack down on millionaires and billionaires who cheat on their taxes. It's estimated to be billions of dollars by think tanks that are left, right, and center. I'm not looking to punish anybody, but I will not add a tax burden, additional tax burden to the middle class in this country. They're already paying enough. I believe what I propose is fair, fiscally responsible, and it raises revenue to pay for the plans I propose and will create millions of jobs that will grow the economy and enhance our financial standing in the country. When you hear someone say they don't want to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% or corporate America, ask them whose taxes you want to raise. Instead, who's they're going to cut? Look, the big tax cut of 2017. Remember, it was supposed to pay for itself. That was how it was sold. And generate vast economic growth. Instead, it added $2 trillion to the deficit. It was a huge windfall for corporate America and those at the very top. Instead of using the tax saving to raise wages and invest in research and development, it poured billions of dollars into the pockets of CEOs. In fact, the pay gap between CEOs and their workers is now among the largest in history. According to one study, CEOs make 320 times what the average worker in their corporation makes. It used to be below 100. The pandemic has only made things worse. 20 million Americans lost their job in the pandemic, working and middle-class Americans. At the same time, roughly 650 billionaires in America, net worth increased by more than $1 trillion in the same exact period. Let me say it again. 650 people increased their wealth by more than $1 trillion during this pandemic. And they're now worth more than $4 trillion. My fellow Americans, trickle down. Trickle down economics has never worked. And it's time to grow the economy from the bottom and the middle out. You know, there's a broad consensus of economists left, right, and center, and they agree what I'm proposing will help create millions of jobs and generate historic economic growth. These are among the highest values investments we can make as a nation. I've often said our greatest strength is the power of our example, not just the example of our power. In my conversations with world leaders, and I've spoken to over 38, 40 of them now, I've made it known that America's back. And you know what they say? The comment I hear most of all from them? So they say, we see America's back, but for how long? But for how long? My fellow Americans, we have to show not just that we're back, but that we're back to stay, and that we aren't going to go it alone. We're going to do it by leading with our allies. No one nation can deal with all the crises of our time, from terrorism to nuclear proliferation, mass migration, cybersecurity, climate change, as well as what we're experiencing now, pandemics. There's no wall high enough to keep any virus out. And our own vaccine supply, as it grows to meet our needs, and we're meeting them, will become an arsenal for vaccines for other countries, just as America was an arsenal for democracy for the world, and in consequence influence the world. But every American will have access before that occurs. Every American will have access to be fully covered by COVID-19 from the vaccines we have. Look, the climate crisis is not our fight alone. It's a global fight. The United States accounts, as all of you know, less than 15% of carbon emissions. The rest of the world accounts for 85%. That's why I kept my commitment to rejoin the Paris Accord, because if we do everything perfectly, it's not going to only matter. I kept my commitment to convene a climate summit right here in America with all the major economies of the world: China, Russia, India, European Union. And I said I'd do it in my first 100 days. I want to be very blunt about it. My attempt was to make sure that the world could see there was a consensus, that we are at an inflection point in history. The consensus is if we act to save the planet, we can create millions of jobs and economic growth and opportunity to raise the standard of living of almost everyone around the world. If you watched any of it and you were all busy, I'm sure you didn't have much time. That's what virtually every nation said, even the ones that aren't doing their fair share. The investments I propose tonight also advance a foreign policy, in my view, that benefits the middle class. That means making sure every nation plays by the same rules in the global economy, including China. In my discussion with President Xi, I told him, we welcome the competition. We're not looking for conflict. But I made absolutely clear that we will defend America's interest across the board. America will stand up to unfair trade practices that undercut American workers and American industries, like subsidies from state to state-owned operations and enterprises, and the theft of American technology and intellectual property. I also told President Xi that we'll maintain a strong military presence in the Indo-Pacific, just as we do with NATO and Europe, not to start a conflict, but to prevent one. I told them what I've said to many world leaders, that America will not back away from our commitments, our commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms, and to our alliances. And I pointed out to him, no responsible American president could remain silent when basic human rights are being so blatantly violated. An American president has to represent the essence of what our country stands for. America is an idea, the most unique idea in history. We are created, all of us, equal. It's who we are. And we cannot walk away from that principle and, in fact, say we're dealing with the American idea. With regard to Russia, I know it concerns some of you, but I made very clear to Putin that we're not going to seek escalation, but their actions will have consequences. They turn out to be true, and they turned out to be true. So I responded directly and proportionally to Russia's interference in our elections and the cyber attacks on our government and our business. They did both of these things, and I told them we would respond, and we have. But we can also cooperate when it's our mutual interest. We did it when we extended the New START Treaty on nuclear arms, and we're working to do it on climate change. But he understands we will respond. On Iran and North Korea, nuclear programs that present serious threats to American security and the security of the world. We're going to be working closely with our allies to address the threats posed by both of these countries through diplomacy as well as stern deterrence. And American leadership means ending the forever war in Afghanistan. We have without hyperbole, the greatest fighting force in the history of the world. I'm the first president in 40 years who knows what it means to have a son serving in a war zone. Today, we have service members serving in the same war zone as their parents did. We have service members in Afghanistan who are not yet born on 9/11. The war in Afghanistan, as we remember the debates here, were never meant to be multi-generational undertakings of nation building. We went to Afghanistan to get the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11. And we said we would follow Osama bin Laden to the gates of hell to do it. If you've been in the upper Konar Valley, you've kind of seen the gates of hell. And we delivered justice to bin Laden. We degraded the terrorist threat of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And after 20 years of valor, and sacrifice, it's time to bring those troops home. Look, even as we do, we'll maintain over-the-horizon capacity to suppress future threats to the homeland. And make no mistake, in 20 years, terrorism has metastasized. The threat has evolved way beyond Afghanistan. Those of you in the intelligence committees, the Foreign Relations Committee, defense committees, you know well, we have to remain vigilant against the threats to the United States wherever they come from. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are in Yemen, Syria, Somalia, other places in Africa, in the Middle East, and beyond. And we won't ignore what our intelligence agencies have determined to be the most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today. White supremacy is terrorism. We're not going to ignore that either. My fellow Americans, look, we have to come together to heal the soul of this nation. It was nearly a year ago before her father's funeral when I spoke with Gianna Floyd, George Floyd's young daughter. She's a little tyke, so I was kneeling down to talk to her so I could look her in the eye. She looked at me, she said, "My daddy changed the world." Well, after the conviction of George Floyd's murderer, we can see how right she was if we have the courage to act as a Congress. We've all seen the knee of injustice on the neck of black Americans. Now's our opportunity to make some real progress. The vast majority of men and women wearing a uniform and a badge serve our communities, and they serve them honorably. I know them. I know they want. I know they want to help meet this moment as well. My fellow Americans, we have to come together to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve, to root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system, and to enact police reform in George Floyd's name that passed the House already. I know Republicans have their own idea. Giant opportunity to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice, real justice. And with the plans outlined tonight, we have a real chance to root out systemic racism that plagues America and American lives in other ways. A chance to deliver real equity, good jobs, good schools, affordable housing, clean air, clean water, being able to generate wealth and pass it down through generations because you have an access to purchase a house. Real opportunities in the lives of more Americans, black, white, Latino, Asian Americans, Native Americans. Look, I also want to thank the United States Senate for voting 94-1 to pass the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to protect Asian American and Pacific Islanders. You acted decisively. You can see on television the viciousness of the hate crimes we've seen over the past year and for too long. I urge the House to do the same and send that legislation to my desk, which I will gladly, anxiously sign. I also hope Congress will get to my desk the Equality Act to protect LGBTQ Americans. For all transgender Americans watching at home, especially young people, you're so brave. I want you to know your president has your back. Another thing, let's authorize the Violence Against Women Act, which has been law for 27 years. "27 years ago, I wrote it. It'll close the act that has to be authorized now, will close the boyfriend loophole to keep guns out of the hands of abusers. The court order said this is an abuser. You can't own a gun. It's to close that loophole that existed. You know, it's estimated that 50 women are shot and killed by an intimate partner every month in America. 50 a month. Let's pass it and save some lives. And I need not tell anyone this, but gun violence has become an epidemic in America. The flag at the White House was still flying at half-mast for the 8 victims of the mass shooting in Georgia, when 10 more lives were taken in a mass shooting in Colorado. And in the week in between those two events, 250 other Americans were shot dead in the streets of America. 250 shot dead. I know how hard it is to make progress on this issue. In the 90s, we passed universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines that hold 100 rounds that can be fired off in seconds. We beat the NRA. Mass shootings and gun violence declined. Check out the report over 10 years. But in the early 2000s, the law expired. We've seen daily bloodshed since. I'm not saying if the law continued, we wouldn't see bloodshed. More than 2 weeks ago in the Rose Garden, surrounded by some of the bravest people I know, the survivors and families who lost loved ones to gun violence, I laid out several of the Department of Justice actions that are being taken to impact on this epidemic. One of them is banning so-called ghost guns. These are homemade guns built from a kit that includes directions how to finish the firearm. The parts have no serial numbers, so they show up at crime scenes and they can't be traced. The buyers of these ghost gun kits aren't required to pass any background check. Anyone, from a criminal or terrorist, could buy this kit and within 30 minutes have a weapon that's lethal, but no more. And I'll do everything in my power to protect the American people from this epidemic of gun violence, but it's time for Congress to act as well. Look, I don't want to become confrontational, but we need more Senate Republicans to join the overwhelming majority of Democratic colleagues and close the loopholes required in background check purchases of guns. We need a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And don't tell me it can't be done. We did it before and it worked. Talk to most responsible gun owners and hunters. They'll tell you there's no possible justification for having 100 rounds in a weapon. What do you think, deer wearing Kevlar vests? And they'll tell you that there are too many people today who are able to buy a gun but shouldn't be able to buy a gun. These kinds of reasonable reforms have overwhelming support from the American people, including many gun owners. The country supports reform, and Congress should act. This shouldn't be a red or blue issue. And no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. From the very beginning, there were certain guns, weapons that could not be owned by Americans. Certain people could not own those weapons ever. We're not changing the Constitution. We're being reasonable. I think this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. I think it's an American issue. And here's what else we can do. Immigration has always been essential to America. Let's end our exhausting war over immigration. For more than 30 years, politicians have talked about immigration reform, and we've done nothing about it. It's time to fix it. On day one of my presidency, I kept my commitment and sent a comprehensive immigration bill to the United States Congress. If you believe we need to secure the border, pass it, because it has a lot of money for high-tech border security. If you believe in a pathway to citizenship, pass it. There's over 11 million undocumented folks, the vast majority of here overstaying visas. Pass it. We can actually, if you actually want to solve a problem, I've sent a bill to take a close look at it. We also have to get at the root problem of why people are fleeing, particularly to our southern border from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The violence, the corruption, the gangs, the political instability, hunger, hurricanes, earthquakes, natural disasters. When I was president, when I was vice president, the president asked me to focus on providing help needed to address the root causes of migration. And it helped keep people in their own countries instead of being forced to leave. The plan was working, but the last administration decided it was not worth it. I'm restoring the program and ask President Harris to lead our diplomatic effort to take care of this. I have absolute confidence she'll get the job done. Now look, if you don't like my plan, let's at least pass what we all agree on. Congress needs to pass legislation this year to finally secure protection for dreamers. The young people have only known America as their home. And permanent protection for immigrants who are here on temporary protective status who came from countries beset by man-made and natural-made violence and disaster. As well as the pathway to citizenship for farm workers who put food on our tables. Look, immigrants have done so much for America during this pandemic and throughout our history. The country supports immigration reform. We should act. Let's argue over it. Let's debate it. But let's act. And if we truly want to restore the soul of America, we need to protect the sacred right to vote. Most people more people voted in the last presidential election than any time in American history, in the middle of the worst pandemic ever. It should be celebrated. Instead, it's being attacked. Congress should pass H.R. 1 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and send it to my desk right away. The country supports it, and Congress should act now. Look, in conclusion, as we gather here tonight, the image of a violent mob assaulting this Capitol, desecrating our democracy, remain vivid in all our minds. Lives were put at risk, many of your lives. Lives were lost. Extraordinary courage was summoned. The insurrection was an existential crisis, a test of whether our democracy could survive, and it did. But the struggle is far from over. The question of whether our democracy will long endure is both ancient and urgent. As old as our republic, still vital today. Can our democracy deliver on its promise that all of us, created equal in the image of God, had a chance to lead lives of dignity, respect, and possibility? Can our democracy deliver to the most pressing needs of our people? Can our democracy overcome the lies, anger, hate, and fears that have pulled us apart? America's adversaries, the autocrats of the world, are betting we can't. And I promise you they're betting we can't. They believe we're too full of anger and division and rage. They look at the images of the mob that assaulted the Capitol as proof that the sun is setting on American democracy. But they're wrong. You know it, I know it. But we have to prove them wrong. We have to prove democracy still works, that our government still works, and we can deliver for our people. In our first 100 days together, we've acted to restore people's faith in democracy to deliver. We're vaccinating the nation. We're creating hundreds of thousands of new jobs. We're delivering real results to people. They can see it, feel it in their own lives. Opening doors of opportunity, guaranteeing some more fairness and justice. That's the essence of America. That's democracy in action. Our Constitution opens with the words, as trite as it sounds, we the people. Well, it's time to remember that we the people are the government. You and I. Not some force in a distant capital. Not some powerful force that we have no control over. It's us. It's we the people. In another era, when our democracy was tested, Franklin Roosevelt reminded us, in America, we do our part. We all do our part. That's all I'm asking. That we do our part, all of us. And if we do that, we will meet the center challenge of the age by proving that democracy is durable and strong. Autocrats will not win the future. We will. America will. And the future belongs to America. As I stand here tonight before you in a new and vital hour of life and democracy of our nation, and I can say with absolute confidence, I have never been more confident or optimistic about America. Not because I'm president, because of what's happening with the American people. We've stared into the abyss of insurrection and autocracy, pandemic and pain, and we, the people, did not flinch. At the very moment our adversaries were certain we'd pull apart and fail, we came together, we united. With light and hope, we summoned a new strength, new resolve to position us to win the competition of the 21st century. On our way to a union more perfect, more prosperous, and more just, as one people, one nation, and one America. Folks, as I told every world leader I've ever met with over the years, it's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America, and it still isn't. We're the United States of America. There's not a single thing, nothing beyond our capacity. We can do whatever we set our minds to if we do it together. So let's begin to get together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you for your patience.
As written, 6,103 words. There were moments when President, no, keep all you up, please, in the room. Thank you. There were moments when President Joe Biden did go off script, but he has finished his address to Congress. He made mention at the top, and no president in history has acknowledged a Madam Vice President and a Madam Speaker of the House. You see there, he's talking to Senator Amy Klobuchar, here the Joint Chiefs of Staff. There's Senator Bernie Sanders. Right now he's talking to Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who's giving him 2 fist pounds. And so she is going to make sure she gets her word in with the President of the United States. A lot of, again, normally, folks, when we watch these speeches, it is jam-packed, thunderous applause from the Democratic side, typical silence from the other side, but because of COVID, the chamber was not packed as we normally see it. They were practicing social distancing throughout today, not only wearing masks, but also being separated in their seats. And so there again, there's the president. Normally what you have, folks, normally you have lots of handshaking going on, backslapping, and of course members having the president autograph their invitations for this moment. But that is not the case due to COVID. The White House is very clear on practicing their COVID protocols. Even though yesterday President Joe Biden went before the cameras and announced the lifting of some of the restrictions from the CDC, allowing folks to gather who have been vaccinated, they still are about emphasizing and doing the right thing. This is a far cry from what we saw with Donald Trump, Republicans flouting the rules. And at that time, of course, you might remember the White House was a COVID hotspot, and so that's what you see here. And so again, he is going through greeting and talking with many Democrats. You see them again not shaking hands, but touching elbows or having the closed fist. And so that is what we are seeing right now. I want to welcome all of you who are watching us. We're going to keep the cameras. We're going to stay in the room, the U.S. Capitol there. And while I introduce our panel joins us right now. Our post-discussion panel. Glad to have them. Omokongo Dabinga. He is, of course, lecturer, School of International Service at the American University. Candace Kelly. She's a legal analyst with Start Your Morning, BNC. Brittany Lee Lewis, political analyst, and Dr. Greg Carr, chair, Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. Brittany, I want to start this off with you. We, of course, heard the president say, no president in history has delivered those words, Madam Speaker and Madam Vice President. He said, it's about time. And of course, the chamber gave him a standing ovation with those words.
Well, Roland, it is about time, and we know that it is long overdue, and it's been the goal of the Biden administration to have extremely diverse cabinet and leadership, and we continue to see him deliver on that promise. So no surprises there. He's the man to do it first.
Candace, when you look at last couple of years, you had members of Congress on the Democratic side who many of them were all white to signify the suffrage movement 100th anniversary. That was, of course, an historic moment to see that. Look, but most of your other major countries, they've had female leaders. This country has not. We still have not had a female leader. The closest we've gotten is to have a female vice president and, of course, a female Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi being the first one.
Yeah, whether you're talking about South Korea or Brazil or Jamaica, they have had female presidents. So it's a reminder of how far behind we are, but it's also a reminder of how far we have come. And as he said, in the future, we could potentially see the vice president be in his position, the president of the United States. And while there is a sense of there are a lot of guidelines in place and, you know, the COVID 6 feet, there's still a closeness. There were still some hugs. There was still some closeness before the speech, because it wasn't lost on a lot of people how precious this moment was, how big this moment was when it came to Pelosi and the vice president being on the stage at the same time. So definitely a lot of history made in so many ways that he had to acknowledge, and that certainly people were thinking about when they saw these two women walk into the chambers.
I'm going to go to you now, Omokongo. When we look at what Biden had to say, laying out the case, talking about where we are with the economy, and making the point, again, we had to listen to all of the bluster and all of the loudness over the last 4 years, taking credit for everything. But when he said, no president has had the number of jobs that created in the first 100 days. Same thing when it comes to the stock market. Republicans crowed about that for the last 4 years. It's amazing how quiet they are now.
Oh my goodness, it's amazing. I think the hypocrisy is just astounding. But the fact of the matter is, we know the truth and we have to speak it. And I love the way that Biden tied in so much of what he was talking about tonight to jobs. Because quite honestly, he wasn't speaking to the Republicans that were in front of him. He was speaking to Republicans in rural America and other parts of America who are so caught up in Fox News and all of the nonsense and propaganda that they're hearing that he spoke and said, look, I'm trying to get you employed. I'm trying to get you broadband. I'm trying to get you better education. I'm trying to get you health care. And so he's not listening to those Republicans who are right there in front of him, and really their hypocrisy, who they wanted to give everything to Trump, all of the jobs that Obama had created. They wanted to give him all of the props, but they don't want to give Biden any of the credit right now. Their hypocrisy is astounding, and I'm glad you are calling it out.
Dr. Greg Carr, normally we are used to performance art, when it comes to these speeches. Normally they will have a member of the United States military there, and they will salute them, and the whole room will stand up, and it will show people, oh my goodness, how bipartisan we are. Well, because of COVID, because you didn't have all of the visitors, you didn't have the usual pomp and circumstance with this particular speech, it allowed the focus to literally be on the speech itself and not all the other performance things that people love to grade presidents on.
Well, Roland, here's the deal. I'm not kidding around. Of course, two of the most favorite phrases of Joe Biden. Here's the deal, and I'm not kidding around. It was a very workmanlike speech. It was a speech a plumber might give, or somebody who's coming out to tell you what the damage is going to be on fixing your roof and cutting the yard. And I think the stripping away of all that pomp and circumstance played well into the tone, into the approach, and into the words in that speech. I mean, we're talking about a $1.8 trillion in spending, new spending and tax cuts. Maybe 800 some million of that is in tax cuts. The biggest part of that is tax credits. What has been put together is
the chair declares the joint session of the two houses now dissolved.
Okay, so she's closed now. I'm waiting for William Carney. I'm sorry, not William Carney. What's the brother's name? Tim Scott. William Carney was the man in the Civil War who didn't let the flag touch the ground. I guess they're going to have Tim Scott run out for the White Nationalist Party and give the response. But what we heard tonight was something no one can disagree with unless you are a white nationalist. And the White Nationalist Party sitting there in the chamber, and that group, and I agree with Dr. Dibinga, I agree with you, Brother Omokongo, he's speaking to the people outside the chamber. And speaking to the people outside the chamber, there was something for everyone.
That the message of the president be referred to.
Let me now go to Congressman G.K. Butterfield of North Carolina. He joins us right now. Congressman Butterfield, normally you will be there in the Capitol with your fellow members of Congress, but COVID, they had the restrictions, so many members are at home or in their offices. Your assessment of what Greg said, this workmanlike speech we heard tonight from President Joe Biden.
Well, thank you, Roland. Let me say good evening to you. And we just witnessed a very momentous speech tonight. What we have seen over the last hour and 15 minutes is the President of the United States delivering on the promises that he made during the campaign. You know, Joe Biden promised many things during the campaign, and we've been waiting to see if he's going to deliver on those promises. Yes, we are talking about investment in infrastructure, but tonight he talked about investing in human capital. He's calling it the American Family Plan. He's talking about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, talking about HBCUs and Pell Grants, a cap on child care payments, 7%. Working families can really relate to that. He wants to bring in a system whereby parents will pay no more than 7% of their income for child care. That is phenomenal. Talking about the importance of passing the George Floyd Policing Act. We passed it in the House, but now we're waiting for the Senate to take action. We've got to stop the whole scourge of police violence in this country. We saw it this week in my home state of North Carolina, in Elizabeth City, where police are continuing to take lives. And we've got to bring bring that to an end. And finally, Joe Biden talked about something that's very special to me, and that is the precious right to vote. We see state after state passing election laws now that will make it more and more difficult for African Americans and other minority groups to participate in the electoral process. We want to update the formula so that we can get the Voting Rights Act back in place so that we can stop these states from passing discriminatory election laws. Joe Biden hit it out of the park tonight. I'm so proud of him. He is delivering on what he promised during the campaign. And he talked about reforming the tax code, and that is very special. We need to rein in the corporations that are not paying any taxes at all. And there are more than 50 corporations in America, big companies, that are not paying any income taxes at all. And if we're going to pay for these infrastructure projects and these human investments, we've got to have the capital, and it's going to come from corporate America. Joe Biden hit it out of the park tonight. I'm very proud of him. He's delivering on his promise.
Congressman Butterfield, you're a fellow North Carolinian. Reverend Dr. William J. Barber tweeted this out, and it was in response to what President Biden had to say about poverty. Go to my computer screen, please. He said, McConnell and Republicans can't even clap for the positive impact of reducing child poverty. We must keep mobilizing the vote and make sure they never hold majority again. My goodness, you can't clap on child poverty?
Listen to what Joe Biden said. We want to cut childhood poverty in half. Can you imagine? We can do it in this country. We have the ability to do it. You would think that Republicans would want to reduce poverty, and they sat silent on that subject. But Joe Biden has a plan. If we don't have Republicans to buy into this ambitious plan, we're going to do it on our own. We have the ability, we have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. We can pass it on what we call reconciliation. We want Republican support. We want it to be bipartisan. But if not, we are prepared to pass the American Family Plan into law.
And of course, in that section where he talked about the infrastructure plan, of course, replacing lead pipes, high-speed internet, 35% of rural America does not have that, building a modern power grid. Those were some of the issues that he laid out. That is polling. The infrastructure bill is polling very well by 65% Americans in this country. His plan is about $2 trillion. The Republicans countered with a $600 billion infrastructure plan. That's a huge gap between the two.
Infrastructure is not Democrat or Republican. Infrastructure is needed in every community in America. We have a plan. The president has a plan for $2.3 trillion of infrastructure investment, and that includes high-speed broadband in underserved communities. And the way we're going to pay for that, we're going to make those who earn more than $400,000 a year in income. We're going to require corporations to pay at least 28% of their net profits in taxes, and that's how we're going to pay for this thing. We're going to invest in infrastructure, and we're going to invest in families, low-income families in America. Joe Biden promised it during the campaign, and now we see him delivering.
The last question for you, Congressman, in this here. He talked about the American Jobs Plan. Again, I'm going to go back to what Dr. Greg Carr said. He sounded like it was a plumber or a person coming over to fix your house. Biden said this here, 90% of the infrastructure jobs created in the American Jobs Plan don't require college degrees. 75% do not require an associate's degree. Quote, the American Jobs Plan is a blue-collar blueprint to build America.
The American Jobs Plan will put people to work. We need to invest in the future, 21st century jobs. We need to invest in solar and wind energy. There are so many jobs of the future that are with us right now. You don't need a college education to do it. We want people to go to college and earn their degrees, but there will be plenty of jobs for everyone if we can just pass this legislation that Democrats are advancing.
Congressman G.K. Butterfield, or as we say, the daddy of Alicia Butterfield. I certainly appreciate it, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Roland.
Folks, let's go to the Republican response from Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina.
Feeling that our nation is sliding off its shared foundation and how we move forward together. Growing up, I never dreamed I would be standing here tonight. When I was a kid, my parents divorced. My mother, my brother, and I moved in with my grandparents. 3 of us sharing one bedroom. I was disillusioned and angry. Shared foundation and how we move forward together. Growing up, I never dreamed I would be standing here tonight. When I was a kid, my parents divorced. My mother, my brother, and I moved in with my grandparents. 3 of us sharing one bedroom. I was disillusioned and angry, and I nearly failed out of school. But I was blessed. First, with a praying mama. And let me say this to the single mothers out there who are working their tails off, working hard, trying to make the ends meet, wondering if it's worth it. You can bet it is. God bless your amazing effort on the part of your kids. I was also blessed by a Chick-fil-A operator, John Moniz, and finally with a string of opportunities that are only possible here in America. This past year, I've watched COVID attack every rung of the ladder that helped me up. So many families have lost parents and grandparents too early. So many small businesses have gone under. Becoming a Christian transformed my life, but for months, too many churches were shut down. Most of all, I'm saddened that millions of kids have lost a year of learning when they could not afford to lose a single day. Locking vulnerable kids out of the classroom is locking adults out of their future. Our public schools should have reopened months ago. Other countries did. Private and religious schools did. Science has shown for months that schools are safe. But too often, powerful grown-ups set science aside, and kids like me were left behind. The clearest case I've seen for school choice in our lifetimes, because we know that education is the closest thing to magic in America. Last year, under Republican leadership, we passed 5 bipartisan COVID packages. Congress supported our schools, our hospitals, saved our economy, and funded Operation Warp Speed, delivering vaccines in record time. All 5 bills got 90 votes in the Senate. Common sense found common ground. In February, Republicans told President Biden we wanted to keep working together to finish this fight. But Democrats wanted to go it alone. They spent almost $2 trillion on a partisan bill that the White House bragged was the most liberal bill in American history. Only 1% went to vaccinations, no requirement to reopen schools promptly. COVID brought Congress together 5 times. This administration pushed us apart. Another issue that should unite us is infrastructure. Republicans support everything you think of when you think of infrastructure. Roads, bridges, ports, airports, waterways, high-speed broadband. We're in for all of that. But again, Democrats want a partisan wish list. They won't even build bridges to build bridges. Less than 6% of the president's plan goes to roads and bridges. It's a liberal wish list of big government waste, plus the biggest job-killing tax hikes in a generation. Experts say when all is said and done, it would lower wages of the average American worker and shrink our economy. Tonight, we also heard about a so-called family plan, even more taxing, even more spending, to put Washington even more in the middle of your life, from the cradle to college. The beauty of the American dream is that families get to define it for themselves. We should be expanding opportunities and options for all families, not throwing money at certain issues because Democrats think they know best. Infrastructure spending that shrinks our economy is not common sense. Weakening our southern borders and creating a crisis is not compassionate. The president is also abandoning principles he's held for decades. Now he says your tax dollars should fund abortions. He's laying groundwork to pack the Supreme Court. This is not common ground. Nowhere do we need common ground more desperately than in our discussions of race. I have experienced the pain of discrimination. I know what it feels like to be pulled over for no reason, to be followed around the store while I'm shopping. I remember every morning at the kitchen table, my grandfather would open the newspaper and read it, I thought. But later I realized he had never learned to read it. He just wanted to set the right example. I've also experienced a different kind of intolerance. I get called Uncle Tom and the N-word by progressives, by liberals. Just last week, a national newspaper suggested my family's poverty was actually privilege because a relative owned land generations before my time. Believe me, I know firsthand our healing is not finished. In 2015, after the shooting of Walter Scott, I wrote a bill to fund body cameras. Last year, after the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, I built an even bigger police reform proposal. But my Democratic colleagues blocked it. I extended an olive branch. I offered amendments, but Democrats used a filibuster to block the debate from even happening. My friends across the aisle seemed to want the issue more than they wanted a solution. But I'm still working. I'm hopeful that this will be different. When America comes together, we've made tremendous progress, but powerful forces want to pull us apart. 100 years ago, kids in classrooms were taught the color of their skin was their most important characteristic. And if they looked a certain way, they were inferior. Today, kids are being taught that the color of their skin defines them again. And if they look a certain way, they're an oppressor. From colleges to corporations to our culture, people are making money and gaining power by pretending we haven't made any progress at all, by doubling down on the divisions we've worked so hard to heal. You know this stuff is wrong. Hear me clearly. America is not a racist country. It's backwards to fight discrimination with different types of discrimination, and it's wrong to try to use our painful past to dishonestly shut down debates in the present. I'm an African American who's voted in the South my entire life. I take voting rights personally. Republicans support making it easier to vote and harder to cheat, and so do the voters. Big majorities of Americans support early voting, and big majorities support voter ID, including African Americans and Hispanics. Common sense makes common ground. But today, this conversation has collapsed. The state of Georgia passed a law that expands early voting, preserves no excuse mail-in voting, and despite what the president claimed, did not reduce election day hours. If you actually read this law, it's mainstream. It will be easier to vote early in Georgia than in Democrat-run New York. But the left doesn't want you to know that. They want people virtue signaling by yelling about a law they haven't even read. Fact checkers have called out the White House for misstatements. The president absurdly claims that this is worse than Jim Crow. What is going on here? I'll tell you, a Washington power grab. This misplaced outrage is supposed to justify Democrats' new sweeping bill that would take over elections for all 50 states. It would send public funds to political campaigns you disagree with and make the bipartisan Federal Elections Commission partisan. This is not about civil rights or our racial past. It's about rigging elections in the future. And no, the same filibuster that President Obama and President Biden praised when they were senators, the same filibuster that the Democrats used to kill my police reform bill last year has not suddenly become a racist relic just because the shoe is now on the other foot. Race is not a political weapon to settle every issue the way one side wants. It's far too important. This should be a joyful springtime for our nation. This administration inherited a tide that had already turned. The coronavirus is on the run. Thanks to Operation Warp Speed and the Trump administration, our country is flooded with safe and effective vaccines. Thanks to our bipartisan work last year, job openings are rebounding. So why do we feel so divided? Anxious. A nation with so much cause for hope should not feel so heavy laden. A president who promised to bring us together should not be pushing agendas that tear us apart. The American family deserves better, and we know what better looks like. Just before COVID, we had the most inclusive economy in my lifetime, the lowest unemployment rates ever recorded for African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians, and a 70-year low nearly for women. Wages were growing faster at the bottom than at the top. The bottom 25% saw their wages go up faster than the top 25%. That happened because Republicans focused on expanding opportunity for all Americans. In addition to that, we passed opportunity zones, criminal justice reform, and permanent funding for historically black colleges and universities for the first time ever. We fought the drug epidemic, rebuilt our military, and cut taxes for working families and single moms like the one that raised me. Our best future will not come from Washington schemes or socialist dreams. It will come from you, the American people. Black, Hispanic, white, and Asian, Republican and Democrat, brave police officers in black neighborhoods. We are not adversaries. We are family. We are all in this together, and we get to live in the greatest country on earth. The country where my grandfather in his 94 years saw his family go from cotton to Congress in one lifetime. So I am more than hopeful. I am confident that our finest hour is yet to come. Original sin is never the end of the story, not in our souls and not for our nation. The real story is always redemption. I am standing here because my mom has prayed me through some really tough times. I believe our nation has succeeded the same way because generations of Americans in their own ways have asked for grace and God has supplied it. So I will close with a word from a worship song that really helped me through this past year of COVID. The music is new, but the words draw from Scripture. May the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you. In your weeping and your rejoicing, he is for you. May his favor be upon our nation for 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children. Good night, and God bless the United States of America.
All right, that was a reaction from Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. You typically will have those responses. Let's go to Illinois. Congresswoman Robin Kelly, she joins us right now. Congresswoman Kelly, I'm sure you sat there and you were wondering what world Senator Tim Scott was speaking of, because it certainly is one different when you believe in the word called facts.
Well, it's just so disturbing because I don't remember him coming out and talking about Trump in the 4 years that Trump was in office and all the things that he did. And when I think about, Whip Clyburn trying to pass the Charleston loophole bill, I don't hear Tim Scott talking about that when, 9 people were died in Mother Emanuel Church. We're having a hard time getting the background check bill passed and the Charleston loophole, his state.
And not only that, I was sitting here taking some notes when he referenced this notion of Democrats blocking police reform. If I'm correct, because we actually carried it on here, what they actually said is, why aren't we discussing this in the Senate Judiciary Committee, where the committee can actually offer amendments to actually improve the bill? Republicans did not want that to happen. They wanted it to happen on the floor. Then Senator Kamala Harris was one of the folks where she pretty much gut checked Senator John Cornyn, both of the members of that at the time of that committee, by saying, if you want to discuss the bill, why are we doing it in the committee? Why do y'all only want to do it out here on the floor? And so that's actually what they were filibustering, was the fact that Republicans did not want to go through the actual process of how bills are actually handled.
Yeah, he has selective memory for sure.
Indeed. One of the I want to talk about President Biden's speech. One of the things that he said that I thought was critically important, he talked about, obviously, the Derek Chauvin verdict in the death of George Floyd, but then made this point about white supremacy when he said white supremacy is terrorism. That is important.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's what we said. It was domestic terrorism. And I was there on January 6th on my hands and knees in the gallery. We were the people left behind and hoping we would get out alive. And when we came out, you know, luckily there were 5 of them laying on their stomachs with the police holding guns to them because they certainly were trying to get in. So, no, domestic terrorists for sure, without a doubt.
Obviously, the president laid out a number of different things. At the end of the day, the Democrats in the House, y'all passed a lot of those bills. The problem is they're being held up in the United States Senate.
I know. I mean, even though we say we're Democrat, even in the House, you know, there's only 219 of us. You know, we lost Congressman Hastings and then 3, you know, Congressman Fudge, Cedric, Richmond, and Deb Haaland are now in the administration. And then in the Senate, 48 Democrats, 2 independents. So if one Democrat, you know, doesn't want to vote with us or one independent, you know, we're in trouble. And then when we need the 60 votes, we're really in trouble. So it's very difficult, very difficult still.
All right, then. Congressman Robin Kelly, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. And congratulations.
Thank you.
On becoming
Have a good night.
Congratulations on becoming the new head of the Illinois Democratic Party.
Thank you. We'll talk about that another day.
All right, let's make it happen. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Let's go back to my panel. I saw your face, Greg Carr, at the outset of Senator Tim Scott's response. You now have the floor. We can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
That's because I was being saved by the ancestors, brother.
There you go. All right.
Hear me cussing. But yeah, Tim Scott, big up to you, brother. You took your time. You didn't sound too bad as you over enunciated your words. It's still, I'm sure, beset by the deep insecurities that were bred in that poverty-stricken room that you were in. Shout out to you for embarrassing your grandfather, for posterity, for trying to model for you something you clearly didn't pick up because you didn't read the Georgia bill. If you think that's what's in it, he had an excuse. What's yours? But what a remarkable, stunning, stereotypical display of stupidity by a pure feckless clown. Tim Scott doing Tim Scott things. But more importantly, as we sweep aside his distraction, it's very clear what the White Nationalist Party strategy will be. It will be what it continues to be. They are going to work to cement the gerrymander. And I'm glad that Representative Kelly mentioned Hastings, Holland, Fudge, and Richmond, because there's a razor-thin majority now. And as we saw the initial census data come out a couple of days ago, they're going to do that. They're going to try to hold on for these 2 years. And then voter suppression, they're going to hope to flip the House and the Senate. And they're going to vote against everything, all those tax credits, all that job work, the expansion of Medicaid, the M-Home care. They're going to work against child and family support. They're going to forget free community college. They are voting no. And finally, Senator Scott, our dear friend and brother, who could be the man on the ground with a knee on his neck tonight as he leaves wherever he made that speech from. he seems to have thrown in completely shaking that Django leg for those $400,000 and above folks, and those other people, the people who got that $1 trillion added to their billions, who got that $2 trillion tax cut as he grinned like a black Gerber's baby out there in the White House next to his master, Donald Trump, back in 2017. Shout out, Tim. You're doing a good job. Shake that Django leg.
Brittany, this is a tweet that was posted about 11 minutes ago by Bernice King in response to what Senator Tim Scott said. He is, quote, "America is not a racist country." Her retort, Senator Scott lives in another America.
Well, you know, she hit the nail on the head. This man is a trip. I mean, even when I heard him say, cotton to Congress in one lifetime. Look, I am the American dream. But first off, I want this man to sit in a Black Studies class. But more importantly, you know, everything looks like progress when you start our story with enslavement. And that's what I want Tim Scott to get. But Tim Scott is doing Tim Scott. You know, he's doing the work of the white supremacist that he works for. And he is hoping that Americans will continue to invest in this colorblind, individualistic, lift yourself up by the bootstraps ideology, which is certainly not realistic, not our ancestors' dreams. It's a shame. I'm tired of listening to this man, and he certainly wasn't spitting any type of information. It was interesting that he said, you know, the liberals don't have any facts, the Democrats don't have any facts, and this man is representing, you know, the party of fracking, is representing the party that won't put forward gun reforms, is representing the party, you know, that believes in school choice against the majority of what educators argue for. So this man is a whole clown.
Candace, I found something very interesting. He called the Georgia bill a mainstream bill. He talked about how he said, quote, "Republicans make it easier to vote, harder to cheat." What's interesting, though, he talked about the voting hours and things along those lines, but the reality is they don't allow for the counties to have the discretion to have their voting hours beginning at 7 a.m., closing at 7 p.m. What they did is they put in uniform voting hours 9 to 5. So therefore, people who have to work, they got to have some other place to vote. What Senator Tim Scott did not say, we talked about, how they expanded early voting. He did not say that they have drastically cut the number of ballot drop boxes, and those drop boxes must be placed inside of voting locations, and which means you can only drop off your absentee ballot when hours are open. So again, he was lying.
Yeah, you know, there's a crime in criminal law called omission. It is an actual crime where you omit facts in order to make things look good for you. So he's committed the crime of omission because once you add those facts that he omitted, it doesn't make any sense in terms of his world. You know, what parallel universe he's living in, I am not sure, but he's leaving out the facts so that he can look like he makes sense. You know, he said something. He said, common sense means common ground, but you have to first start with common sense. How can he deny all of the information, all the bills that are out there, just the hundreds across the country that have been preventing and set out to prevent Black people from voting? It's mind-boggling how he set up there. The fact that he even mentioned that there was no racism in this country when he has spent time writing editorials about how he has been stopped and how he emotes fear when he goes into his car and police are behind him. And as what was already spoken, how he could leave tonight and be stopped because he is a big Black man driving in a suit. It doesn't matter what you have on. So crime by omission is what I say, leaving out the facts to make it look like his story works, which what we all know is that it just doesn't. It doesn't work.
Congo, he said tax cuts will lower wages. I'm confused by that because when I look at the speech of President Joe Biden, he said we're not going to raise the taxes on anybody or a couple making less than $400,000. He said in the speech, the $1 trillion at 650 of the richest billionaires were able to make during COVID. I'm just confused. That's a very small percentage of Americans when he said those who make more than $1 million are going to, but who pay a capital gains rate that is lower than many middle class people. He said that represents a very small percentage of Americans. I'm just trying to understand what the hell is Senator Tim Scott talking about, because if you're making $400,000 or higher, you're literally in the top of the top of the top in America.
That's right. And the reason we all struggling to understand it is because, as everyone has said tonight, the common pattern is he lying, plain and simple. We already heard what Joe Biden talked about, that $2 trillion that was added from the tax cut of 2017. And as he said, trickle-down economics, it just does not work. People really thought that that was going to save the economy. And then he tried to tie what the last administration did with COVID relief, talking about we got these 5 bipartisan bills, but he didn't talk about the fact that under Steve Mnuchin, much of that money went to people who are their friends. And Mnuchin didn't even want to release the list of people who received that money, because people who are struggling at the bottom, small business owners and restaurant owners and the like, were not getting that money. And so again, he's lying, he's making up these stories because he feels like it's going to appeal to a base that hopefully got a little bit of sense if they watch anything of what Joe Biden said. He's just making it all up.
Folks, let's go to Congressman Andre Carson out of Indiana. He joins us right now. Congressman Carson, you're there in your Midwestern state. Your assessment of what President Biden had to say, and we'd love to hear your response, if you saw it, to the response from South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
Well, I was happy that President Biden mentioned really focusing on things like police excess. I would love for him to have added more specificity and been clear, but he has a very ambitious agenda, I think, in trying to pass a massive reform bill on the first anniversary of the death of Brother George Floyd. No tax increases. He wants to take us back to the Bush-era tax level of 39.6%. I think that's pretty ambitious. He wants to lower prescription drug costs. I think that's great. He really highlighted the fact that we just passed a $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. That was great. But as it relates to Brother Tim Scott, you know, I knew Tim in the House. Greg Carr, who I haven't seen since he was at Indiana Black Expo when Tupac was there. I was on the side of the stage. Good to see that brother again. But, you know, Brother Greg Carr made some very important points. I think Tim Scott made a decision years ago to go to the party with the shortest line. And so he's highlighting talking points. Tim Scott said America is not a racist country. How do you explain what happened to Andrew Brown? How do you explain what happened to George Floyd? How do you explain a tyrannical president, Roland, the past 4 years, who tried to take America back to some mythical place that never existed, and he incited Islamophobia, xenophobia, anti-black sentiment, all for the sake of preserving his fiefdom, but he failed miserably. In fact, the insurrection on January 6th caused many members of Congress, particularly CBC members, to be targeted. I was targeted, as you know, Roland, by a gentleman, a white supremacist, who had a list of 5 elected officials. I was one of them. He was targeting me, one, because I was black, and I was one of 3 Muslims in Congress. And you're talking about America's not a racist country? The whole Trump presidency was based off of racism and xenophobia, and Brother Tim Scott was silent during his whole administration.
Enough said. Congressman Andre Carson, always a pleasure to have you on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Look forward to having you back.
What an honor. Thank you, brother.
All right, folks. In a moment, we're going to be joined by Congresswoman Karen Bass. I want to go back to my panel. Dr. Carr, first of all, Congressman Carson, man, that's been a long time. You were at the Indiana Black Expo with Tupac.
Tupac and Khalid Muhammad on a panel, if you can believe that. Tupac went last and burnt the whole place down, and Andre Carson, Rep. Carson, was right there. Oh man, that's who we need right now here on Tim Scott, is Tupac, brother.
Well, I'm sort of reminded in 2000 when Tavis had one of his State of Black America events. It was at the University of Southern California. It preceded the Democratic National Convention, and Charles Ogletree of Harvard was moderating a panel, and I believe it was Nikki Giovanni and I think it was Stanley Crouch who were on the panel. And Charles Ogletree asked Nikki Giovanni, Nikki, why do you like Tupac so much? Folk, if y'all don't like cussing, I'm going to give y'all 10 seconds to go ahead and turn the volume down. But it is undoubtedly one of the greatest quotes I've ever heard in my life. When I interviewed Nikki Giovanni, I told her it is absolutely a top 5 quote of all time as far as I'm concerned. And this is what Nikki said. Nikki said, why do I like Tupac? Somebody got to call a motherfucker a motherfucker.
There it is. There it is.
The whole room just fell out, Brittany. The whole room just fell out. So I told her, hey, that's all-time Hall of Fame quote right there from Nikki Giovanni. Indeed. I do want to, with a couple, one of the note while we're waiting to get Congresswoman Karen Bass on, to get her on here, and for all the folks who are watching, y'all, this is also why it's important for y'all to support Roland Martin Unfiltered, because I literally have my television. I got the television on right here, and I'm looking at the other networks. I'm looking at what their coverage is, and I'm looking at all the other folk. I guarantee you we've had more black members of Congress on already than the networks combined. See, this is why it's important to have programs like this. That's why we want y'all to support what we do. And of course, if you want to join our Bring the Funk fan club, you can do so by joining, going to Cash App, $RM Unfiltered, Venmo.com/RM Unfiltered, PayPal.me/R Martin Unfiltered. Of course, Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com and Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And so we appreciate several thousand of y'all have been hanging with us. We've been broadcasting since 7 p.m. We normally start at 6 p.m. We chose to start at 7 p.m. because of President Joe Biden's address to Congress. And so we appreciate that. But this is why it's important to support black-owned platforms. Again, I'm seeing an occasion. I'm going to tell y'all right now what's going to happen. All the black people commenting on TV, y'all going to see them about 1 a.m. That's when they gonna come on the air. But right now, you're actually seeing folk, and and I don't know why people sitting here call me live during the show. You know I'm live during the show. Who's this? Congresswoman. So Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. So here's the deal. You calling me now. I'm about to literally interview Congresswoman Karen Bass. We live right now. So I'm gonna have my booker call you right back. Okay. And I didn't know who he was calling because your phone say unknown. So it's all good. Yeah, we're going to have you on next. So I'm going to have her call you right now, okay? Okay. Huh? Do I have a number? I text you, Congresswoman. All right, she'll hit you right next. All right, bye-bye. Y'all see how black... Y'all
that's got a commercial rolling because that is the blackest interview in the history of any broadcast platform involving an elected politician since the beginning. Before Roosevelt's fireside chats, that has got to be the blackest conversation with an elected official.
Hey, look, I'm gonna answer the phone. I don't care who calling, and if you're gonna call me live, something might happen when you call me live. So
might pick up.
Yeah, I will pick up and you will be live. Let's go. Joining us right now from California, Congresswoman Karen Bass. Glad to have you here. I didn't mean to do your fellow member of Congress like that, Congresswoman Bass, but I was about to go to you and she called, so I had to go ahead and answer the phone. But we'll get her on. First of all, glad to have you here. I got to ask you this. you're focused, obviously, you've been given the directive by Speaker Nancy Pelosi to lock and load on the George Floyd Justice Act. You heard Senator Tim Scott give the response. President Joe Biden referenced the conviction of Derek Chauvin. And so let's talk about that, what needs to be done to get the Senate to actually make this a reality.
Well, actually, you know, the leaders over in the Senate are Tim Scott and Cory Booker, and things have been going extremely well. So I didn't get to hear all of Senator Scott's speech because I was walking over from hearing the president. But what I did hear him say, I think he was speaking on behalf of his party and his caucus. But he has been very open and willing to discuss all of the aspects of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and he has moved quite a bit from where he was last year. So I'm very hopeful, Roland. I'm very hopeful that not only are we going to put this on the president's desk, but that we will meet the charge that he laid out tonight, which is he wants to see it on his desk before May 25th, which, of course, is the tragic anniversary of Mr. Floyd's murder.
One of the things that Senator Tim Scott did say was he blamed Democrats for blocking his bill last year, saying they filibustered it. But again, we do a fact check here all the time. Democrats, and I remember then Senator Kamala Harris said, no, Senate through committee, allow us to offer amendments. They said, but we're not going to allow this bill to go forward for a vote on the floor if we're not able to actually make the bill better. He left that out tonight, but that's actually what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but in the House, we passed it on March 3rd, and since March 3rd, we've been in conversations with a bipartisan group in the House. They have been working with their Senate colleagues, and so again, I'm convinced that we will make headway. You know, there's so much needs to be done, Roland. I mean, if we got every single thing we wanted in this bill, it would still not be enough. And it's really a time in the country for a complete overhaul, a complete difference in view as to how we see policing. You know, when it comes to policing black folks, we get warriors. When it's policing white folks, they get public servants. And we need public servants. We need our community to be protected and served, not treated as though we're in the middle of Baghdad.
I do want to, and so what do you want the people who are watching and listening to do? Because at the end of the day, look, it's going to take a lot of work. It is April 28th. The anniversary of the murder of George Floyd is May 25th, so that's less than a month. It can get done, but it's going to take pressure. It's going to take folk understanding that you can't just keep prolonging this thing. It can actually get done.
Well, and as you know, Congress can act in 10 days or 10 years. And what determines the difference when it comes to our issues, not corporate issues, but our issues, what makes the difference is public pressure. And so all of the people that listen and follow you on your live broadcast, they need to be calling the senators and tell them that this is a major human rights issue. Roland, if what goes on in the United States, if you pick a country where 3 people died a day from police, we'd be talking about human rights violations and let's impose sanctions. We don't view the murders of black and brown people in the United States as a human rights issue, and we need to look at it that way. And so the only reason the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act exists at all is because of the movement that was generated last year after the world saw him be tortured to death. That generated hundreds of thousands of people on the street. Well, they're not on the street right now. They are on the streets in Minneapolis. They're on the street in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. But we need to have that public pressure to help us get this across the finish line.
And look, look, we were very tough on Senator Tim Scott tonight, but the bottom line is he can lead his party across the finish line. He can. He's working with you, working with Senator Cory Booker, and the bottom line is it was Senator Edward Brooke, a Republican, who helped broker the filibuster, the Fair Housing Act in 1968, and I have long said that Senator Tim Scott has a lot more leverage and power in the Republican Party on issues like this than he actually uses. And then if he puts his foot down, he's going to force his party to oppose its only black United States senator. So I'm hopeful that that actually happens.
Yes, and I don't think that they're going to do that. I think that they're going to support him.
All right. Well, whatever you need us to do, simply let us know. We're going to focus on this each and every single day. And so we normally put something at the bottom of our screen. So let us know who folk need to call, who need to put pressure on, because this thing can get done. But just got to move some folks on just a little bit more quickly than others.
And Roland, has he been on the show?
You know, see, he's not been on the show in about 3 years. So I had him on my TV One show. I welcomed. So I'm still waiting for him to return my text messages. And you know,
well, I'm gonna see him tomorrow. I will tell him. I will encourage him to come on the show.
And let him know. And I'm sure he's probably gonna say, well, you know, Roland's been real tough on me, and you can say, hell, Tim, he kick our ass too. So it ain't like it ain't like it's just about you, because it ain't about no R or no D. It's about black folks. So just let them know. I appreciate it.
I will.
Always great to see you, Congresswoman Karen Bass out of California. Thank you so very much. Let's go to our panel, go back to our panel, of course, and then, we will soon be joined by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee from the 18th Congressional District in Texas. Let's talk about that. Look, you know, Congresswoman Bass, CBC, and others, they want that George Floyd Justice Act signed into law by the anniversary of George Floyd's death, which is May 25th. But you also saw tonight when President Biden talked about the John Lewis Act, all of those Republicans who stayed seated. Now, what got me was a whole bunch of them love going down to Selma on a little bus trip with Congressman John Lewis. And I said then, you know, and I got it. There was no disrespect to Congressman Lewis. I said, but it was a field trip for some of those Republicans. Get to take photos and sit here and say, yeah, we here with John. No, damn that. If you are not there to support the issues, then frankly, you are wasting my time.
Absolutely, and it's spitting on his grave, to be quite honest. They are so good at doing everything for show. They might even have a Mitt Romney who will say a Black Lives Matter, you know, at a rally, and they'll come out and look like they're about it. You even had Mitch McConnell on record saying that he supports an anti-lynching bill, and again, no show. So they're good for making it look like they're about this business, but they're really not about this life at all. And every single time we bring up this issue of voting rights, they always want to try to harken back to some other type of time that never existed. And really, at the end of the day, they want to try to drag this out so they can increase their chances of winning in the midterm elections. And so when people are talking about, oh, we shouldn't boycott in Georgia, we shouldn't do all, what are our options? Well, they say vote. Well, if you're going to break down, you know, stop all these opportunities for us to vote with your ID nonsense, with your 9-to-5 nonsense, with your lack of having ballot box nonsense, then you're already handicapping the next election. And so these guys do not want voting rights in any way, shape, or form, from Trump to so many other leaders on record just in the last year, saying that when we have more opportunities to vote, Republicans lose. So they are full of it in every way, shape, and form. And they've proven it.
Look, Candace, the bill is going to be tough. Look, to get over, so you don't have to deal with filibuster, Senator Tim Scott, he's going to have to bring over 9 Republicans with him, at least. To me, this is one of those deals where, okay, here's the bill. Tim, go get him. Let's see if you can bring 9 with you.
Yeah, let's see if you can bring 9 with you, because this is what we know about him. He wants to fit in, right? So this is his opportunity to do so. You know, when I look at the men and women on the evenings like this, acting the way they do, not standing up really when they should, like you said, when they're talking about child poverty, how can you not like that? You got to think of all these people in their 8th grade selves. They're like the worst of their 8th grade, but just in grown-up bodies, and that's what's coming out. And Scott wants to just fit in. We know what's going on right now, that we have to get this act passed, or else we're going to dealing with the piecemeal system. The Department of Justice going into city by city and trying to figure out if there are policing practices that are unconstitutional. We already know the answer to that. That process is going to take 1.5 years to figure out. And even then, we have police departments that can fight back what the Justice Department has determined. We've got to get this bill passed. And this is the opportunity for him to speak up and be the person that he should be. Think of himself driving behind in that car and the feelings of angst and fear and emotion when a police officer is driving behind him. Hopefully he will be able to do that. As Congresswoman Bass said, the talks are going well. So hopefully that's a good sign in terms of what he can actually bring to the table.
Brittany.
Yeah, you know, we got to get it through. And I'm just praying that the Senate doesn't strip out qualified immunity, because without that, what do we have? And you know, there are plenty of things to applaud Biden for tonight. But one of the things that I wish he would have hit harder, and perhaps it would have affected his strategy to really reach out to those on the other side of the aisle, is the way in which he talks about policing is honorable. When so many in this country are talking about not only funding the police, but abolition. So we're clearly not we're not taking this issue out from the roots. But with that being said, we got to hope that qualified immunity stays in there. And more importantly, you know, we really just have to make sure that people on the ground are staying in the ground and pushing, because unless they remove the filibuster, I'm not sure Tim Scott is going to lead this effort for us.
Greg Carr, again, I mentioned those two bills together for a reason, because they are intertwined. The reality is, if Democrats are not able to move on H.R. 1 and the John Lewis bill, then Republicans are going to run roughshod when it comes to 2022 elections. In fact, in his particular speech, Senator Scott referenced that. He called it a Washington power grab. No, the power grab is what we're seeing by Republicans in states like Texas, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Pennsylvania, this fiasco happening out in Arizona. Scott also said, quote, it's about rigging elections in the future. No, that's what the GOP is trying to do.
Sure. And I think this is where we cannot get distracted. Brittany, I agree with you. Biden could have hit harder, but Biden is still under the illusion, as we saw him end with unicorns and rainbows, with the one people, one nation, one America absurdity. The White Nationalist Party is a solid block of 50 white nationalists in the United States Senate. I will include Brother Scott, who seems to have, perhaps he didn't forget that qualified immunity was a non-starter in his bill, that he only proposed a bill to incentivize stopping chokeholds. So, you know, and maybe some body cams. Yeah, Tim Scott's a human joke. And even if he were to vote, after he checked, because Mitch McConnell can count, once Tim Scott listens to his master's voice and perhaps is allowed to vote on the other side, what we might have seen tonight, you know, we saw this before. They try to position folk to give the response. And given what Joe Biden said tonight about having Kamala Harris lead on jobs and immigration, shout out Scott, by the way, to be anti-Dreamer, anti-TPS, you know, what we may have seen is a potential 2024 election. Tim Scott will likely be on the Republican ticket, maybe as the vice president. And Kamala Harris will either be on the ticket as vice president running for re-election, or if she defeats everyone in the primaries, at the top of the ticket. But Tim Scott is being positioned in the ultimate gaslight. The White Nationalist Party is losing population. And as we heard, I agree with you completely, Brother Omakongo. I mean, Dr. Debenga nailed it. What we're really talking about is 2022. And that gerrymander, they're going to try to take the House back, the voter suppression to deliver the Senate. They do not have an agenda. Their agenda, their values are very simple. It comes down to one word: power. They don't give a damn. Listen very carefully, and when you start talking about these tax hikes will strip jobs or depress jobs, when you're talking about the jobs and innovation part of that $1.8 trillion proposal that we heard tonight, when you hear about 46 million, for example, billion for clean energy, when you hear about these jobs, these new jobs, well, Joe Biden combined that with the idea that they're union jobs. That isn't altogether clear. In fact, what you're going to see is pushback from the oil and gas industry, and the people they own, which I'll end with this one just for now. One of the people they own is the senator from West Virginia, Uncle Joe Manchin. And Manchin and Sinema ensure that There isn't 50-50 in the Senate. The only thing we have to do now is remember that everything coming out of the mouths of the White Nationalist Party is gaslighting. Break their political backs. Joe and Kristen, you're up in the dock, and we'll run you over too. But do not for a minute try to engage in some type of intelligent back and forth. With all due respect to Congresswoman Lee, who knows a lot more about this than I ever will. You got to love her temperament. I don't know that I wouldn't have loved to have seen her as vice president. I tell you what, if it can be done, she'd be the kind of person that can do it. But here's the problem. It can't be done.
Let's go right now to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas. Glad to have you on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Tonight, you heard President Joe Biden mention a reference to George Floyd. He wants to sign that George Floyd Justice Act. And we just had Congresswoman Karen Bass, and it's going to take a lot of heavy lifting to get the Senate to act on this particular bill.
A lot of heavy lifting, but a lot of reality, and there needs to be a reality check. I am delighted to be working with Karen Bass, and as the Congressional Black Caucus has pushed this from last session, as the Judiciary Committee has pushed this now for 2 decades, and I've served on that committee for 27 years. We have not had any form of real police reform for 30 years plus. This is like being in the desert and no water of any kind comes in your direction, and you're barely alive. We are barely alive in the criminal justice system, and we're barely alive in promoting and enhancing what good policing is all about. So if we're in the Senate has to have a reality check, and I believe they will have that. As we speak, the family of Andrew Brown is mourning as to why he was shot in the head, fleeing and unarmed. The family of a person by the name of Mr. Gonzalez in California, who was smothered to death, if you will, by police sitting on him right around the time that the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the George Floyd decision was rendered. Deontay Wright, right around the time of the George Floyd trial. So this is not going to stop. And the only way that you begin to change behavior, as Dr. King said, I may not be able to change hearts, but I have to change laws. We can't go back. And the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is part of President Biden's commitment to racial equity as the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals, which is also a bill that's on track. All of these bills deal with racial equity across the board in the lives of African American. So there is no way to respond other than getting Senator Scott to understand, to work with, to send the other senators who have questions to be able to work with them. That is the issue that we have to address, and we are prepared to address it. We're prepared to address it calmly. We're prepared to address it with facts, with data, with the lives of Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, those individuals who have just been indicted, or the Department of Justice. We are prepared to deal with all of these in the way that gets this legislation to the president's desk.
Also want to ask you about another issue. The president saying tonight that white supremacy is terrorism.
It absolutely is. I experienced it, Roland. And by the way, it's good to be with you. Good to be with Yates High School, 3rd Ward, and beyond. But I experienced it on January 6th. For about 4 or 5 years, the Homeland Security Committee was trying to point to the administration, particularly the Trump administration, that the new terror was domestic terrorism and white supremacy. It's evidenced in so many of the acts, including Dylan Roof, who killed 9 worshipers in Mother Emanuel Church. What more do you need? The synagogue that was attacked in Pennsylvania, that individual was aggravated because that synagogue seemed to welcome immigrants. So we have domestic terrorism, white supremacy, and white racism, or racism, is evident in this country. The Constitution promoted it by not in any way creating slaves or giving them even the status of one human being in the United States Constitution, in the founding beginning of this nation. And so that stigma, that definition carried through the 20th century. It carried into the 1960s in the civil rights movement when people died simply to vote, simply to march. It was in actuality the breaking of a second Reconstruction. Now we're in the 21st century, and on January 6th, I can assure you that those domestic terrorists were filled with white supremacists who came to attack black police officers and to call members of Congress of color names, and were prepared to kill them. Were prepared to kill the Speaker of the House, the Vice President of the United States out of domestic terrorism. But as black officers indicated, they were called names. And so it begs the question whether anyone doesn't think that the country has a difficult problem with racism. Now, I'm not here to throw stones. I'm here to solve the problem, but you cannot solve the problem unless you acknowledge the problem. I can't have my children being raised and children's children being raised, and we haven't tried to confront racism. The country will be better if we leap past this schism, this cancer, and begin to address it. And one of it is the president's racial equity. That's the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and it's H.R. 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals. It is to repair. We have to repair and restore. And so I think the president made those steps tonight. I think he was unabashedly unafraid to say that, just as he was not afraid to talk about trillions of dollars in making America better, building it back better with the American Jobs Plan and as well the American Family Plan. African Americans will be impacted by that. And that is turning the corner and building an economy that's built on working people, small businesses, churning the economy and making it better. That's part of helping our community as well.
All right, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, it is a pleasure, and I will be in Houston on May 13th, actually Baytown, for the rally for the sister who was killed a year ago in Baytown by a cop there. But on May 12th, I'll be presenting two of those Jack Yates High students, the Roland S. Martin Scholarship, the first ones. So look forward to being back in my hometown.
Hope to see you both at both events, and thank you for your great support of our community.
I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, let's go back to our panel here. Brittany, what should have Biden talked about that would you want him to talk about tonight that you didn't hear?
Yeah, Roland, I have to go back. I know we've been talking quite a bit about policing, but that was the big thing that I really wanted him to hit home. I mean, he's talking about epidemics, right? And we know that policing, specifically violence against Black people, is in fact an epidemic, right? We even have the CDC come out and say that it is an epidemic. Racism is an epidemic. So I wish he would have hit that a little bit harder. I also wish he would be more inclusive of, again, what we've seen on the ground. We've seen one of the largest national and international movements around defunding the police and abolition. And, his response there, I thought, was a little bit lacking and very, very quick. I also wanted him to give a little more time to the LGBTQ community and trans rights. He mentioned it. I think there was much more to be said there, especially as we're watching several states continue to push legislation and agendas against these particular communities. So I think there would have been a little more room there to go further, but.
Omokongo.
I would have liked to hear him go a little bit deeper on education. Quite honestly, he didn't mention much about kids being in schools, but quite honestly, we have to understand that going back to school is not the cure-all for all of us. Many of us need that environment and some of the services, but for many of us, we're going back into schools where we feel like we're being targeted racially, where we don't have a culturally competent curriculum. And he could have talked a little bit more about the thousands of kids who are actually missing right now from schooling, who need to actually be found before they even go back to school. So I think that there's a lot of issues as relates to education that I would have liked to hear a little bit more of. And I also would have liked to hear him talk a little bit more as it relates to gun violence about some of these other. He talked about 250 shootings between the times of the mass shootings, but specifically some of the violence that we're dealing in our communities in areas like Southeast DC, where I live, in Chicago and the like, and how we need to have things like community programs and other types of funding to help with that. He could have spent a little bit of time there as well.
Candace.
I really wanted to hear him mention more specifics about qualitative immunity and getting rid of it, what that means, because I don't think that people on a large scale understand exactly what it means and why that's really kind of a block that stops people from getting justice when they go to police officers and go to the justice system. This immunity protects people too much. And I think that overall, I mean, we know that his speech was kind of a throw the dart on the wall and see what sticks. He put a lot of things in there. But for some of the issues that we are hearing now in the headlines, we just needed to hear a lot more detail, as was mentioned, education. How does that work? And when we talk about reform in the police system, exactly how does that work? More details is what I was looking for.
Greg Carr. Greg, you're on mute again.
I'll be trying to mute myself. I'm over here like, no. I didn't really have any expectations, and I don't, because politicians are employees. I think Biden's speech was part of a larger strategy, under promise and over deliver. He opened with that, with the number of shots that have been administered, with the 1.3 million new jobs, with 90% of people, 90% of the people in the country live within 5 miles of a place to get inoculated. And then he ended with a flourish, right? Cooperation and competition with China, Afghanistan troop withdrawal, the George Floyd Act, and then immigration reform, John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So it was, as you say, a kind of a menu. But I think most importantly, I think what they're positioning themselves to do, and we hear hints of it even with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, they're positioning themselves to make it impossible for Sinema and Joe Manchin to stand in the way of blowing up the filibuster. I think that's really what this speech was, just one more link in the chain to continue that. If there were one thing I would have hoped to at least gesture toward, you know, there were 360,000 new cases of COVID in India yesterday. We are not out of this. The COVID doesn't know national boundaries. So while the hillbilly horde and the handful of our people who are listening to some fool on the internet are saying they're not going to get the vaccine, don't forget that the entire world is subject to this. And in fact, the United States has just said that they're telling people to get out of India. We are far from out of the woods. I would have liked to perhaps him say something about that. But I really didn't have any expectations. And I think what Biden is doing is consistent with what he's done these first 100 days, which is under promise and over deliver. I think it's part of a larger strategy, what he did tonight.
I agree with that. One of the things that I would have liked to see President Biden do tonight was go a little bit deeper and be much more specific when it comes to economics and underserved communities. I would have wanted him to speak a little bit more from his Lift Every Voice plan, and then in the state what he wants to deliver on. But I think what the strategy is to focus on these much larger initiatives. Again, if you look at what has happened, you look at the COVID relief bill, then when you look at the issue when it comes to the infrastructure bill, looking at these things which are all very broadly popular across the board, and then laying out his tax cut plan, which same thing. Despite Republicans sitting on their hands, and again, that image of Republicans saying nothing and doing nothing. When he talked about the 650 billionaires who made the most money and how they sat there and did not applaud, that showed you, and he kept going back to that. And so, but I still would have wanted to hear a lot more of that. The White House promised more when it came to the issue of race equity. I did not hear a lot, which was important. But I do believe that point about taking the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28% and the capital gains on millionaires is going to be critically important, because you have to build up to that. Again, for a lot of people who want to talk about how do you fund things, how do you fund free college, how do you fund free child care, all those things, his whole deal is you got to pay for it. And so when you hear Senator Elizabeth Warren talks about how we can tax the richest of the rich, and that's the piece right there. I think the way to negate Republicans on this is if you lock and load on the rich the richest of the rich, and that way you don't get some broke white person in Georgia or Tennessee who's sitting there. They're trying to take my money. No, fool. They are not talking about you. They are talking about the folks who, again, who have all the damn money in this country and closing those particular loopholes. That is the whole point. And so people need to go ahead and understand that and not falling for the okie doke. And so I think that is what you're seeing. But let me say this again to all the black folks, and I see y'all out here, and y'all sitting there, where this, where that, they pay that, all these folks, and Greg, I definitely want to get your thoughts on this. All these folk who yelling, screaming, well, they passed the anti-Asian bill, Asians got something, we ain't got nothing. And I'm sitting there going, y'all, you act as if you don't have hate crime legislation that already targets African Americans. Greg and Candace, speak to that, please.
I'll just say very quickly, I get out of your way, Candace. We have to fight for everything we have. I thought one of the most powerful lines in his speech tonight, going to your point about isolating the super rich, was when he said trickle down doesn't work. You have to grow it from the bottom and the middle. Why begrudge trying to pass legislation to protect anyone's humanity? And I did not like how he opened up with, this check helped to pay the rent and, his forestalled food, got food. And I'm thinking to myself, this must have been a different check than the one you sent out. You sound like George W. Bush when he didn't know the price of milk. Do you really think that little bit of money went somewhere? However, the point I'm trying to make, though, is that while we must continue to push to get more of our resources back. I've even heard people say, well, they're going to give more money to the IRS and they're going to go out and investigate people who got the checks. Could you use your ears and listen? $400,000 and above, they're going to go try to find some of this money these people have been stashing in these tax havens. Let us not sacrifice our humanity by trying to compete to avoid last place with folks who are also in harm's way. I know it's a tough thing to hear, but the only way we're going to get out of this mess is to be strategic and to think in a way that allows us to move in a way that we get what we need, and that might mean somebody else gets what they need. You know what? You just live with it. White nationalism is our common enemy. And if nobody in this country knows that beside the Native Americans better than the Africans.
Candace, respond that, and also you make your final comment.
You talk about these laws that are to come with Asian Americans, laws that are already on the books. This is how people have to understand the law. We already have laws on the books that should be protecting Asian Americans, blacks, LGBT on the books already. It's just that people are not following them. These new laws are laws that are already, that we have the EEOC. We have plans on the books in terms of what happened after the riots. Obama had a policing plan that he left the next administration. We're just not following it. So every time we look at these laws, people have to understand that these are reminders. These are reimagining, again, what we need to remind people of to do. We know what we need to do. Just consider these new laws a reminder of what we already have on paper. And that's what these next steps are. We already know what to do. We've seen it. We just now have to actually do it.
Final comment, Omakongo.
Well, I think that going off of that last point, we have to continue to fight. We have to continue to fight for this legislation, whether we're talking about voting, and even if it means ending the filibuster to protect voting, what is more sacred? We need to have that George Floyd bill passed, and we have to remember that we can't keep trying to win the hearts of these guys who have no intentions of being with us in any way, shape, or form, and finding that common ground. I would like to end with another quote from Dr. King, who said that you cannot legislate morality, but you can regulate behavior. We need to fight these terrorists, fight these white supremacists. We need to get these laws passed so we can put them where they need to be so that we can move forward as a country with the rights that we earn. And I know Joe Biden liked to say that the middle class built this country, but enslaved Africans built this country before that happened.
Brittany?
Yeah, I have to echo what everyone else has said. first off, I just want to say that I'm grateful to the organizers that made it possible for us to listen to Biden tonight, as opposed to 45 and his blatant white supremacist agenda. But he discussed so many important topics, but we have to continue to fight. One, I hope that we continue to fight to end the filibuster, because so many of these things, whether it be voting, DC statehood, $15 minimum wage, gun reform, you name it, have passed the House. So, you know, we have to continue to fight. We have to stay out there with that, and with the George Floyd law. So let's stay in the streets.
All right then, folks. And I thought I was about to close up, but we're trying. She just called Congresswoman Alma Adams of North Carolina, and so we're trying to get her on. But in the meantime, y'all, on Monday, we debut the first of a 6-part series on Facebook, Intergenerational Conversations. Conversations with young folks and elders. Y'all, it's a 6-part series. It's unbelievable. The first one, Dr. Janetta B. Cole, sitting down and vibing with Tiffany Lofton. Here's a preview.
Our age have lost the ability to focus the discipline on the art of organizing.
It takes all of y'all to represent your generation. The African proverb says, the young go fast, the elders know the way.
That is so freaking dope.
What a powerful combination. The challenges, there's so many of them and they're complex, and we need to be moving to address them. But I'm able to say, watch out, Tiffany. I know this wrong.
Like you said, giving folks the wisdom and we can go fast together. Mm-hmm. It happens in a lot of spaces. I don't think it happens enough.
All right, folks, it's a 15-minute conversation, so it's not long, but y'all got to check it out. In fact, they talked for more than an hour. If we didn't yell break, they would still be talking, and we shot that thing 2 months ago. So I can't wait for y'all to check it out. And so please go to our Facebook page. We have pinned it at the top, so make it real easy for you to go watch that. It's also on my Instagram page, so go watch it out. Go watch that. And so we got Janetta B. Cole, Tiffany Lofton, upcoming, Bree Newsom, Alexis Herman, Chuck D, Chris Payne, Reverend William Barber, Brittany Packnett, and Alexis Herman. Then we also have Ambassador Andrew Young and Cliff Albright. So some amazing conversations, folks. I want to end our coverage of President Joe Biden's speech tonight, is the joint session of Congress. Going back to North Carolina, Congresswoman Alma Adams, who joins us right now. Congresswoman, glad to have you on the show. Just your assessment of what you heard tonight from President Joe Biden and the marching orders that people should have tomorrow. I think you're on mute.
On from me. Okay.
There we go.
Is that good?
You're good.
Okay. Well, good to talk to you, Roland. I was happy to hear the president. I was so proud of him. He stood in front on 2 history-making women in front of them and gave his address and talked about how we're going to overcome this crisis. He talked about the historic investments that he's willing to make. He gave us a blueprint. He talked about education, child care, families. It was all about working families. It was all about not just the rich folks, but the working folks. And I was just happy to hear him. This was, I think, a refreshing a statement from our president. I thought it was a great speech. It was calm. His presence was just outstanding, and it was just wonderful. I think we've been waiting for this. He gave a presidential address, but it clearly was about taking care of the people, and he talked about affordable housing and also trying to get us back on track in terms of all of the problems that we're having now with racism and guns and violence. He talked about historically black colleges and universities, close to my heart, and I'm just happy to see that he's got a plan that I think it's workable, it's doable, and he really talked about us working together. So he wasn't into partisan affiliation. And so it was really good. It was good to hear a real president address some of the real problems of our country. And I was just excited to hear him. And I think we have a lot to look forward to.
One of the things that also jumped out, as far as I'm concerned, was tone. You made a point about that, the tone, which is a stark contrast than the loud, lying bluster we've heard for the last 4 years.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, listen, people were just elated by that, you know, to have someone speak to you as a person, to speak to you in a respectable tone, to show that he appreciates everyone, and it doesn't matter where you live, how much money you have in your pocket, that kind of thing. What your zip code is, everybody he believes deserves an opportunity. And he talked about healthcare being a right, not just a privilege for some, but a right for everyone. So listen, we're going to have a stronger America because of this president. And he certainly has gotten us to, I think, a really good point in terms of this pandemic. He's encouraging folks to take their shots, and I'm on that too. Take your shot. It's a shot for life. We want to get things coming back to some normalcy. I think that's the way to do it. So I was proud of him, and just happy to hear him address. This was, I think, one of the best speeches I've heard him give. So listen, I was really, really excited about it, and I think we're going to make a lot of progress with Joe Biden.
Last one for you. I got to get your thoughts on what's happening in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. I was there the last 3 days. Just your thoughts on what's going on.
Well, I'm absolutely, yeah, first of all, it's very embarrassing for North Carolina, but I think it's also very hurtful for that family, for that community, for North Carolina to have this happen. I just believe the sheriff could have gotten his information out early. We could have got the tapes, I think, should have been released. The fact that now he's talking about 45 days, or at least the judge, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. We've got to change some laws in North Carolina. There's no reason for that. This man was shot in the back, 4 or 5 times. And I just think, when they can't put the information out there like they should have. Obviously, there's some things that they don't want the community to know, and that's just unfortunate to say that, but it certainly looks very suspicious to me. But we have to do right. Listen, it's been a week today, and still we've not been able to see the tape, don't have information. This family deserves to know what happened to their family members. So we're not happy about what's going on, but I think that it's going to be up to this legislature to really make some changes in terms of the laws, because that should not be. Other states have been releasing these body cams, these tapes pretty much immediately. There's no reason that this shouldn't have happened that way as well. So people are angry, people are upset, people are hurt, but I just think it's very unfair that they're treating this family, this community, and our state the way they are. So I would say to folks, listen, sheriffs are elected. These are elected people. You know what you need to do.
All right, Congresswoman Alma Adams, always a pleasure. Always from Texas A&M Aggie to North Carolina A&T Aggie. I appreciate it. Right. Thanks a lot.
Good to talk to you, Roland. Have
Likewise. A good night. Thank you very much. Let me thank all of our panelists, Makongo, Brittany, Candace, and Greg Carr. Thank you for being with us a little bit longer than we normally do with the show, but it was important, I think, for us to have the black perspective on this night. The folks at Black News Channel, they went off at 11 o'clock live. They're now in encore presentation. We still here. And look, it's important for us to have a black perspective. It's important for us to be able to allow our experts to offer expert analysis. Tomorrow, our hope is to have Bill Spriggs, economist, Howard University, to be on talking about the impact of what Joe Biden had to say about economically, how it's going to impact us. And to everybody who's listening, that's why it matters to have black-owned media. Y'all heard me sitting here highly critical of companies not advertising with us. Let me just give y'all an update. You can keep it right here on the Firebox, Henry. Henry. I met with General Motors today. Very frank conversation. They saw my video from Friday. They heard exactly what I had to say. They said that they are committed to increasing their spend and changing the way they do business with black-owned media. I said we will be holding you accountable. We'll be watching that. And see, y'all know how I roll. My philosophy is simple. If you do good, I'll talk about you. If you do bad, I'll talk about you. At the end of the day, I'll talk about you. If General Motors meets what they say they're going to do, then I will praise them for it. I don't give praise before. I don't give praise before something happens. I speak honestly about it after it happens. And so that's the way I roll. And so we're going to keep doing that. And so it's important for us to have the platforms where we can actually speak to our audience from our perspective and break these things down. We'll have more on what President Joe Biden said today on tomorrow's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Look forward to having our regular Thursday panel. Greg, we'll see you as well, and so many other folk. And so just want everybody to understand that's what we're about. We continue to cover what's happening in Elizabeth City as well. There are going to be some events happening this weekend. We still have our live stream every single day. We're covering the developments, and so that's why we have created what we do here. We want our folks to understand that, look, that's cute, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all those folk, but we center black people. We center black people and black experts and black excellence, and that's why we do it. So I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. And so, folks, y'all get some rest. I'm about to do the same. Let me thank my staff as well. They stay longer than we normally do. So thank you everybody in our control room, everybody involved, and all the CBC members who joined us. We had several others who wanted to be with us, but they were out of pocket. And so, but we're going to keep talking to them. So thanks a bunch, folks. All of you tuning in. Don't forget, join our Bring the Funk fan club. You know how to reach us. We certainly want you to join us. Cash App, $RM Unfiltered, PayPal.me/R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo.com/RM Unfiltered, Zelle, Roland@RolandSMartin.com, and go check out our Facebook First Conversation. Dr. Janetta B. Cole and Tiffany Lofton. It's a great conversation. Trust me, you will enjoy it. Folks, that's it for our special presentation of President Joe Biden's address to Congress. Thank you so very much, and we shall see you guys tomorrow.